Welcome to Hockey Night in New York, where Islanders hockey is always top shelf. Whether you got your start as a Dynasty veteran, a Millbury survivor, or you were born into the Church of Trotz, Hockey Night in New York is your home for all things Isles. Now, here are your eclectic hosts, Sean Cuthbert and Christian Arnold.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is Hockey Night in New York. Welcome to the program, everyone. It is Sunday, March 6, 2022. Coming at you live from the Hockey Night New York studios on Long Island. Got another amazingly exceptional, fantastic show here for you tonight. Scott Burnside of Daily Faceoff is going to join us. My name is Sean Cuthbert. With me, as always, is Christian Arnold. Christian, how are you?
Well, it's good to be back. I guess technically I'm not always with you because the last 2 weeks I haven't been.
With me as most of the time.
There we go.
Christian, yes, welcome
It's
back.
nice to
You
be
had
back.
a little sabbatical, but you're back. How does it feel?
Feels nice. It seems like nothing has changed.
Not much has. We're still here.
We're still here.
We're still here.
We're still talking
covering the
Islanders, and they're keeping it interesting.
Yeah. So before we jump into that, want to remind everybody that we are happy to be presented by R.J. Daniels American Bar and Grill, located at 279A Sunrise Highway in Rockville Center. It's the best place to catch the Isles when you can't be at the game. Head on down for great food and drink specials, plenty of HD TVs, and in-game sound. Also happy to be sponsored by Blue Line Deli and Bagels, located at 719 West Jericho Turnpike in Huntington, 217 Carlton Avenue in East Islip, and of course, UBS Arena at Belmont. They are an official partner of the New York Islanders. Check out the menu at BlueLineDeli.com for all the great offerings. Also happy to be sponsored by Ty Technology, a voice-over IP company providing phone services for businesses across the country. If you're tired of dealing with long hold times and the impersonal service of companies like Spectrum, Optimum, and Verizon, give Ty Technology a call at 516-856-7800 for 3 free months of service. And happy to be sponsored by Oyster Bay Brewing Company, owner of the Barn Rocker Session Ale, available at 12 locations at the Islanders' brand new home in UBS Arena, and even more distributors across the country from coast to coast. You can also visit the tap room at 36 Audrey Avenue in Oyster Bay 7 days a week to sample all their fantastic offerings. And remember to get your questions in for the Questions Ruined segment, brought to you by Oyster Bay Brewing Company. So, Christian, 2 nice wins.
Yeah.
2 disappointing losses. What do you say, CA?
It's been an interesting week to say the least. I think the Islanders showed that they're still competing, which is nice. I think that for the first time in a while, I'd say I bought into the fact that the refs and the officiating kind of screwed the Islanders twice in the span of 4 games.
A little bit.
It looked like it was headed towards 3 times in the span of 4 games with the 2 disallowed Kyle Palmieri goals on Saturday's win over the St. Louis Blues. So certainly an interesting turn of events there. But yeah, Islanders are definitely an interesting place. And, now as we get close to the trade deadline, we're going to talk a lot about that with Scott Burnside.
Yes.
He's going to give us some insight there, but certainly a lot of questions that need to be answered as we get closer to there, and obviously a lot to look forward to as far as and when I say a lot to look forward to, I don't mean in anticipation, but sort of there's a lot of things to kind of focus in on once you get past the trade deadline, because I think at this point everyone kind of knows where the season's headed and what is going to occur.
Yeah, it's kind of an assessment period, right? Not just for the organization, but fans as well. Just how this team's performing going forward, with the thought that they're probably not headed for the postseason. So you got the trade deadline looming, as you mentioned, on the 21st. Who do you keep? Who do you try to get something for as you get to the deadline? And, you getting guys with another opportunity here, like Sebastian Aho. He's jumped in a little bit with Char being hurt, and they sat Green for a couple of games. So you kind of just have to look at the big picture now and see where everybody fits and what you want to hang on to for the rest of the season heading into the summer, and where you might want to try to grab some assets to, I guess, add to the team over the summer as well.
And it's disappointing in the sense that obviously no one expected this to be what we would be talking about, or anyone would be talking about when it came to the New York Islanders this season, considering the way things went last season. So it's a little weird to kind of be, I don't want to say going backwards, but certainly backpedaling a little bit to where it almost seems like this team was and this organization was, a couple of years ago, where every year at this point, all right, let's see what's happening and what does this mean for next year, and who are the guys that could take advantage of these opportunities going forward, and this and that, and to kind of hear that again is it's a little disappointing, to say the least, because this was a team that has had so much promise and success in the last couple of years. And, it seems like everyone, top to bottom, is going through sort of those same question marks. I know here at Hockey Night in New York, we're doing the same thing. We're reassessing.
So many
We're
questions.
going through questions.
Should we bring Christian back? He was gone for 2 weeks.
I think those 2 weeks, obviously, we're testing out some new people and
had fun with Mike. Had fun with Tony. Chris Botta did a great job.
Yeah,
as
I don't
a guest.
know. I feel,
man.
there's a lot of assessment going on, and there's questions everywhere. Joking aside, though, it's certainly, it is disappointing to see the Islanders kind of take that step back a little bit. I mean, I don't want to say I don't think it could happen again next year, but my hope and my optimism is that this is sort of this is the regression that you see before the next big step forward. And that's the hope.
I think that's the way, if you try to, be a positive on the positive side of things, that's how you look at it. We've talked about the fact that they had a lot of things go wrong, and they still have a core that they're building around. This is a theme we've kind of used every episode, and I think there's reason to believe that. And they are playing better, not at the rate you need to make it mean anything for this season, but there are some more bright spots to take. I mean, they finished their West Coast swing out to California and Seattle 2-2-1. You take that in a normal season. You're like, that's fine, 500 hockey. This season,
especially
obviously,
at this point in the year,
it doesn't help.
Yeah.
But it's not a bad way to go out west. You get a couple wins and you grab some points. But more recently, we're seeing the team performing better. We've started to talk about over the last couple of weeks how guys like Zach Parise and Kyle Palmieri have woken up, and they've had a bit of a resurgence, and they're starting to put points up. And there's the whole debate. Is it because the pressure's off and they're out of it? And, maybe they're just kind of playing it a little more easier out there. Is it just because it took this much time for them to get going? It's hard to say, but, a lot of people were getting on those two guys, particularly Palmieri, and the way he's just turned it around. He said, what is it? I think he has like 6 goals in his last 10 or something like that. It would have been more if he didn't have 2 disallowed goals against the Blues yesterday. So, I mean, it's positive.
Which is why for the first time ever, I said to Sean, I think this is the first time in a long time that I actually agreed with people saying that the officials were out to get the Islanders, because it was almost like they were trying to prove that point.
It's strange. Now that you brought it up, you look at that goal against Colorado, and, I mean, they called it a goal on the ice. And they always say to overturn a call, you need conclusive evidence to bring it back the other way. Now, unless there's some views and angles that Toronto had, the stuff that I saw, and there was plenty of people pointing out this one freezed frame of where it looked like there was a little smidgen of white between the goal line and the puck, where it looks like it's in.
Right.
Now, unless there was something else up in Toronto that we weren't privy to seeing, that doesn't tell me there was enough evidence to overturn that goal.
That, under the rules, I mean, by definition, would make sense, but I think we've seen that doesn't always happen.
No, it's completely inconsistent. And Barry Trotz made a great point in the post-game press conference. He said, look, if that wasn't a goal, it should have been a penalty.
Yeah.
Because Aho had a stick at his waist. Yeah. That's why he tripped up before he even put the puck in the net. So, okay, fine, call the goal off, but then there should have been a penalty on the play. And you'd like to think that the way things transpire after that, maybe the Islanders, they keep the lead.
Right.
It stays tied at least. Right, they get a power play, and maybe it goes to overtime. They get a chance at a point, maybe 2 points, but they don't go down a goal a minute later after the goal's called off.
Goals are called off, yeah.
Right, and Colorado puts one in, and then they end up having the advantage going for the rest of the game. I mean, look, it doesn't matter. Like, losing that game didn't tank the season because it's over already as far as making the playoffs. I'm sorry to be so negative, but I mean, in the grand scheme, it doesn't. But look, we're all watching because we still want to see the boys win, right? And that was one of their better games. They gave Colorado a great game. It's a game that they could have won, and it's a shame that the officiating played such a big part in it, and where it looked like they were going to have a nice little 1-goal lead in the latter parts of the third, all of a sudden they're down a goal a minute later and they can't come back. So it's a shame. But look, I mean, I guess any loss from here on out, even like that one, if you want to, do the whole silver lining thing, it's another ball in the lottery. It's another lottery ball.
Which is But the one thing I will say that I still don't buy into is this sort of league conspiracy against the New York Islanders. I mean, the officiating has always been bad in the NHL. One of the big things has always been the lack of accountability by the league, by anyone to hold officials accountable in this league. And when you look at some of the other sports that are covered by reporters and have, big fan bases and all this and that. The one thing you can say for baseball, for basketball, for the NFL, I believe, is that all of their officials are, upon request, made available to a pool reporter, so that if there is something like this that transpires, someone has to answer for that.
Yeah.
The NHL doesn't really have that policy. I think you can make that request, but the NHL very rarely grants it, and I don't really know why that is. And I think that's the bigger issue here. I don't think there's some sort of league-wide conspiracy against the New York Islanders. No one in the NHL office hates the Islanders. There's no, the game wasn't rigged for the Vancouver Canucks to win, as T. Boyle, I think, is saying.
How many fan bases out there are like, man, the league really takes care of us? We get a lot of calls.
But everyone says that.
But what I'm saying is pretty much every fan base probably does think that it's against them. I'm just saying it's probably safe to say nobody in Calgary is like, man, the league took care of us again. We shouldn't have got that goal. Like, whoever thinks that the league is helping them out is basically what I'm trying to say.
But I think and I think this is a very good example, and I'm not trying to pick on Trottier 19, but I think this is kind of a really great example of kind of the mentality that people get into, not realizing that these people that make these calls and do their job are professionals, and there's a point where it's not about where they played for when they played or this or that, or sort of these ex-allegiances that I think people may overblow because they have such a strong allegiance, right? Islander fans hate Ranger fans. Ranger fans hate the Islanders, but vice versa.
For the most part, yeah.
So the thought is because Chris King is an ex-Ranger that he is somehow out to get the Islanders in the video war room, which just I mean you really have to hold a deep grudge to really do that.
Yeah.
And I'd be hard pressed to really think that Chris King particularly cares or has such a hatred for the New York Islanders.
I don't think so. But it's funny, Miller Media 22 says, "Oh, come on, the NHL darlings," and maybe the NHL does have their darlings. But what I'm saying is, even the fan bases of those teams, they're not.
They think they get screwed too.
They still think they're getting screwed. They're not like, yeah, they did it for us again. Like Penguins fans are like,
Penguins.
They gave Crosby a break again. Love it. They're still complaining about the one they didn't call.
Right.
So I mean, that's just how it always goes. But it's interesting. It's just a shame how inconsistent it all is. Whether it's penalties, whether it's goal calls. I mean, sometimes it just baffles you because it seems like the evidence is right there, or at least it's clear enough to say there's not enough to overturn this. Right. Why didn't the call on the ice stand? And I think that's what should have happened in the Colorado game. And you look at the interference call in the game against the Blues.
Yeah.
Kyle Palmieri robbed the 2 goals, one of them for the interference. They called Kiefer Bellows on interference there. I mean, he barely touched him. And he was kind of, getting into it with the defenseman there in front of the goalie. So I don't know, but it's a fun discussion, frustrating at times. But we got to pick it up though. So we pre-taped our interview with Scott Burnside because he couldn't hop on with us live. So folks, we're gonna play that for you now for all you guys tuned in live. We're gonna take a break as we always do. We'll come back on the other side with the interview, and then once that's done, we'll pick it up live again. So thank you so much for tuning in to twitch.tv/HockeyNightNY and your favorite podcast providers. We'll be right back.
Nikki, where should I go to watch the Islander game?
Dad, where should Fran go to watch the Islander game?
Just tell her to go to RJ Daniels.
Love the Isles? Go to RJ Daniels and enjoy your favorite hockey team with their big screen TVs and in-game sound. RJ Daniels also provides indoor and outdoor dining, catering, a vibrant late-night bar scene, and weekly live entertainment. Need great planials? Go to RJ Daniels. Call or visit online at rjdaniels.com.
From the Coliseum to UBS Arena, we're still rocking the barn.
We made a product based on something that we're big fans of.
You're going to rock the barn, you're going to have a barn rocker.
Oyster Bay Brewing Company's Barn Rocker, available at UBS Arena and everywhere beer is sold.
I don't want to hear it. It's over. I can't believe they fell short again.
Yeah, but they played so well. They made it to the semifinals 2 years in a row.
The semifinals aren't the cup. God damn it, I hate those Lightning.
They'll get another shot at it next year.
I don't even want to talk about it anymore, all right? They lost, okay? Let me just sit here and enjoy the one thing that makes me a little bit happy. This fresh, delicious, tasty, meaty, turkey-filled Blue Line Combo. I eat 3 every day to help keep me strong.
Hey, Donnie, can I have one of those?
Coming right up. Talk about a blast from the Blue Line.
Blue Line Deli and Bagels. Our goal is to make you a hero.
Did you have a nice break? Well, it's time to get back on the couch for more Islanders therapy with Seany and C. Arnold on Hockey Night in New York.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. It is now time for On the Line, brought to you by our friends at Tie Technology. And joining us right now from Daily Faceoff is Scott Burnside. Scott, thank you so much for joining us tonight. How are you?
I've got no complaints. I got a little trade deadline fever. I guess we're rolling in on, 2 weeks from Monday, I guess. We're getting closer to, one of those lines in the sand for NHL teams and NHL fans, and really it doesn't matter. I don't think whether you're on it's better to be on the buyer side, obviously, but I think for all fans, it really does sort of mark a moment in the NHL season, and then it really does create, I think, sort of opens the gates for the stretch run to the playoffs for the 16 teams that will be in it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fast approaching, and looking forward to getting into that with you. But just wanted to start. You've recently made a move to Daily Faceoff, covering the sport that we all love. You have a podcast now with Mike McKenna called The Suitcase and the Scribe. So I thought maybe we just start out with that. You can tell us a little bit about it and how all that's going over there.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I've known Frank Cervalli, who runs Daily Faceoff for many years now. He's the current president of the PHWA, a post I held for 3 years back in my days at ESPN, and it's nice. And Mike McKenna, my podcast host, and really I just ride Mike's coattails every week. He's if you don't know Mike, you aren't paying attention. But former longtime minor pro and NHL goaltender, and it often happens with goalies, right? But so smart and so intuitive about the game. Spent a couple years after he retired doing analysis for the Golden Knights, and lucky enough to cross paths with him when I was working with the Dallas Stars for a year near the end of his career, and then to be able to hang out and chat hockey with him every week has been a real treat. But there aren't many people in the business who break down a game or a player or a situation in the way that Mike McKenna does. It's been fun to work alongside him. So I would encourage anybody who's hasn't listened or hasn't followed along. He's a multimedia star. He does a lot of different stuff, but thankfully a lot for Daily Faceoff. So it's been a ton of fun.
Scott, Christian Arnold here. First of all, really do appreciate you coming on today, and I feel like you at this point expect a message from me every couple of weeks, because we've been trying to get you on the show for so long. So we really do appreciate it, and we're excited to have you on. You mentioned the trade deadline. You mentioned the excitement and the fever that comes with it. Certainly a lot to unpack heading into that deadline this year. I want to start with the team that we primarily focus on, and that, of course, is the New York Islanders here. Certainly a lot of chatter and a lot of speculation about what they're going to do, because they're in a very gray area. And I think from the people that cover the team every day to the hardcore fan to the casual observer, no one can really say for sure which way Lou Lamoriello is going to go as far as some of the moves that are pending. Maybe you could give us some insight on what you think Lou does here, and who are the players that are potentially on the block at the moment.
Well, you certainly won't get me predicting anything that Lou will do. That's I've learned that long ago in my career, that never to try and pretend you know what Lou is going to do. But I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that the Islanders are not going to be a playoff team. It's simply not going to happen. I know the math suggests, so if everything broke the right way, you can imagine it however you like, but the Islanders are not going to be making the playoffs. And so then it is a question of, what does the team do to try and, salvage, what has been a really disappointing year. And frankly, I think, there's some limitations to it. I know a lot of people have talked a little bit about Cal Clutterbuck and, as a pending UFA. Is he the kind of player that fits sort of a Barclay Goodrow type role, maybe a little bit. I think that's fair, right? Somebody who can come in, play in your bottom six and kill penalties and create some grit. And listen, there are a number of teams out there that I think Cal Clutterbuck, would be a welcome addition, because I think when you look at what Tampa did the last 2 years, really identifying specific needs in their lineup and then going out and filling them. Blake Coleman, Barclay Goodrow. I think of the back end and some of the changes that the Lightning made leading up to both their Cup runs, and guys like Zach Bogosian, Kevin Shattenkirk, even Luke Shen, who was down in the minors and came, played up and down a little bit during the playoff runs. They aren't necessarily your high profile, your big ticket trade deadline items that we in the media like to spend a lot of time talking about, but they were critically important. And so I think Cal Clutterbuck has the potential to be that kind of person. I'm not sure, what happens with Zach Parise, who is also on an expiring contract. Same kind of thing, right? A character guy. I'm just not sure if he sort of fits that kind of mold. And then, is it a question, are you looking at trying to move, changing things up by maybe moving some players with term? And I think that becomes, that's a whole other issue when you've got some players who control their fate, or at least, control their fate in a limited way through limited no trade move, clauses, whether it's a guy like Brock Nelson or Kyle Palmieri, and so I think those are the things that Lou Lamoriello will have to do. I'm not sure, honestly. There's a huge market for a lot of what Lou has, though, right now, and so I think that would be the thing to me. If the Islanders are making moves, they would be more complementary players going out, and then that means that you have to, sort of adjust your expectations on returns to the more modest level. I just think that's the reality of the way that roster is built right now.
I am curious, since you brought it up, we always have this discussion, Sean and I, and some of our listeners and viewers, and that is the what the Islanders potentially could get in a trade for Semyon Varlamov. And a lot of people view him very highly around here because he's obviously done so much with the Islanders and he's had such success in the last couple of years. And even this year, you've seen flashes of that brilliance that he's had despite some of the setbacks this year. But for me, I've always been hesitant to say that the return that they're going to get is going to be this grandiose package that I think people kind of tend to think that the Islanders could get when it comes to Semyon Varlamov. I am curious what you'd imagine a package like that would get the Islanders if they move someone like Varlamov.
Yeah, you know what? I think he's a really interesting figure. And again, another one of the players on the Islanders roster who has, I'm looking at my cap friendly, so I can tell you what they say, 16-team no trade list. So, controls his own fate on some level. Another year left at $5 million, which is, not a huge cap hit, but all those things are relative in a flat cap era. And I think this season is really interesting, though, because there are 3 or 4 teams, and it seems to change on a nightly basis. I see people on social media as we are talking here now speculating, do the Minnesota Wild need to make a goaltending move? Because they've certainly hit the skids and their goaltending has gone a bit sideways. I don't see that as a real option. But you know what? The Washington Capitals are a fascinating situation. Their goaltending, like their whole team, has been up and down through sort of the this last third and maybe a bit more than the third of the season after such a great start. Although Danacek is back into a little bit of a groove, but Semyon Varlamov, something that there's a known quantity there. The Toronto Maple Leafs again coming off another disappointing loss against Vancouver on Saturday night. Their goaltending has gone completely sideways, and Jack Campbell was a great story and all-star and full value for it, but he's not playing at an elite level, and certainly not playing at a level that would allow the Leafs to have much of a chance against either Tampa or Florida in the first round, which looks to be what their matchup would be. So, what does Kyle Dubas do there? And is Semyon Varlamov, is that an option there? Edmonton, every night the narrative changes in Edmonton. Some nights are okay, and then, again, they're coming off a disappointing loss. Mike Smith just not not good enough, frankly, in goal for the Edmonton Oilers. So the Oilers are another team that look to be in the mix. And there just aren't that many goalies that you can really identify that can come in and qualify as an NHL starter, could take on that role. And Marc-Andre Fleury in Chicago is one, and you get a lot of mixed signals as he plays out the final year of his current contract. Also has some trade protection as well. Does he want to go on from Chicago? I think the Blackhawks are going to be very mindful of what Marc-Andre Fleury might want to do, and his career looks like moving forward, up to the 21st of March trade deadline, and then beyond that. So I think Varlamov fits into that picture very nicely. My issue is it's so hard to integrate a goaltender into your system at any time, let alone with less than 2 months left in the regular season. So it's really, sort of 6 weeks or so until the end of the regular season, if you go right up to the March 21st deadline. So it's hard. And history tells you that's why there aren't a ton of starting goalies who go at the trade deadline. And I go back, I'm so old, I can remember vividly when Ryan Miller went from Buffalo to St. Louis. And I remember thinking that the St. Louis Blues were going to win the Stanley Cup. They were a very, very good team, and they were one and done. Lost against Chicago, and Ryan Miller did not fit. It wasn't a great fit for him, and that was that. And I think there's some questions you have to ask about Varlamov in terms of durability. How does he fit? The $5 million, can you fit it into your system, or is there a retention? And then what goes back for it? I just think if you're an acquiring team, it's a crapshoot to try and bring in a goaltender that you are either going to rely on as a starter down the stretch and into the playoffs, or may have to rely on as a starter. I think it's a risky proposition. And if I'm the Toronto Maple Leafs, I'd rather invest on some blue line help and just roll the dice. But it is going to be interesting to see what happens with Varlamov, because he's one of those guys that could fit in, and who knows, maybe could, catch lightning in a bottle and away you go.
Yeah, for sure, Scott. It's always interesting to see how these deadline acquisitions pan out. Sometimes, like you said, you think it's going to be a surefire winner, and then all of a sudden it's a dud. It's funny how it all works. But to keep a key on the aisles here with the deadline, obviously they fell short of some very high expectations this season. And even though that's the case, I think there's still a lot of people around Islander country that still believe that this team, has a window here. Is obviously not this year, but going forward. So when you kind of look at that and put it towards the deadline, does Lou Lamoriello kind of walk a fine line here if he shares that same belief, where he has some guys he might be able to get some assets for, but if he's thinking about next year, does he kind of, get gun shy because he wants to hang on to some of these guys? I mean, obviously it's different with Cal Clutterbuck. He's a pending UFA. He's a guy he might be a little more willing to let go. But do you think he holds some of these guys a little closer to the vest, I suppose, if he's looking towards next year to keep a core that he probably thought was going to be a Stanley Cup contender this year?
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point. And the one thing about somebody like Lou Lamoriello is that when you've seen it all, and he has certainly seen it all, I think you learn not to make those knee-jerk reactions. And there's no question, right? I mean, it's been a miserable year, but you've moved into a new building, and so next year, I think there's a natural reset in this coming off season. I think the goaltending is solid moving forward. I think there's lots to like about the blue line, and I do think I think there is a course of action that allows Lou Lamoriello just to sort of tinker at the deadline, and then sort of refocus come draft time if you are going to make a bigger move. I don't know that there's, again, I think you would want to be very cautious about overreacting to a disappointing season after two straight trips to the Final Four, and where you lose back-to-back in competitive series against the eventual Stanley Cup champions. So I think that's the key there. And, we've seen it, I think about Tampa, 62 wins, get swept in the first round by Columbus. And there's a lot of discussion. What should you do? And, the whole social media, blow it up, but even internally, I think there was some serious consideration. What are we okay? Like, do we need to address our core? Do we need to change fundamentally what kind of team this is? Well, of course they didn't need to, and the proof is in back-to-back cups. And I don't think the Islanders are necessarily at that level, but I also think it's worthwhile to ask yourself the question, does this season mark a start of a decline? And if that's the case, then you have to ask yourself that. But if you don't believe that, then you're right. Don't overreact, and don't do things that you'll regret for 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road.
For sure. And looking again a little bit towards the Islanders' future here, you have Barry Trotz, who's going to be entering the final year of his contract next year. And I suppose my question is, when do Islander fans start getting a little nervous heading into a potential lame duck year if he's not signed? Is there maybe like a cutoff time where Islander fans should be looking for Lou to putting pen to paper for Barry Trotz on an extension, assuming they want to keep him around?
Well, I would, if I'm Barry Trotz and if I'm Lou, I think you want the lame duck, right? I mean, that was the whole Washington thing, right? The dynamic in 2018, and he didn't have a contract, and I'm half joking, but I have subscribed to this, having covered that playoff run and having spent a lot of time around Barry Trotz and the Washington Capitals over the years, in dating back to Barry's time in Nashville, of course. But I really do believe that he coached in a different way during that second half of the 2017-18 season, certainly into the playoffs. I really do think he coached in a different manner, because I think he knew in his heart of hearts that he was going to move on, didn't matter what had happened there, because what had happened within the organization, he felt he needed to move on, and felt that, without a contract extension, that was an important thing to him, and it didn't happen, so he was ready to move on. I'm not suggesting the same thing will happen with the Islanders. My guess is that Barry and Lou have had discussions about this. I mean, there are some coaches, and maybe Dave Tippett's not a great example since he just got fired, but there are some coaches who get to a point in their careers where the security becomes less important, because perhaps you're financially, in a different place, and maybe your family's in a different place, or you've had, in Barry's, in Barry's case, not only have you won a cup, but you've had the success that you had instantly with the Islanders, and he's one of the best coaches of his generation. I think I feel comfortable saying that. So maybe it's not as important to have something done by the draft or by training camp or whatever line in the sand you want to use. Now, maybe it's really important to Barry, so I don't know that, but I don't think it's the kind of thing you can get too worried about. I guess the thing that I would say is if there was suddenly a lack of belief that Barry could do the job with this group, if somehow there were red flags and the feeling was, well, is there a staleness already to this, or whatever it is, then you have to be honest about that, and you have to have that honest conversation with Barry Trotz before the start of the season, and make your decision moving forward. But I wouldn't be surprised if there is an extension announced anytime, but I also don't think it would be something that people should overly fret about, given the state of this team and given the accomplishments of Barry Trotz. To me, it's different than if you're at dealing with a coach with a less padded resume and at a different stage of his career.
Talking with Scott Burnside from dailyfaceoff.com. And Scott, again, obviously the trade deadline looming pretty large as we get closer and closer to it. Claude Giroux, I would say, is the one that right now everyone is trying to figure out what's going to happen there with Philadelphia. I know Giordano and Seattle. There's a lot of focus on. You mentioned Marc-Andre Fleury. What's sort of the latest scuttlebutt now across the league with some of these other big name players that could be on the move?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we saw Tyler Toffoli go early to Calgary, and I think I talked to a couple of executives who wondered, does that start the domino effect with GMs trying to get things done. And I know if you talk to 32 NHL GMs, they would all tell you they would love to do their trade deadline shopping if they are a buyer sooner than later. But the reality of the situation is that with the flat cap and so many teams with players on LTIR up against the cap, it makes it hard to do, right? I mean, there's a certain fluidity to it, especially in the Western Conference, where the playoff picture continues to change every day. And a month ago I looked at the Dallas Stars and I thought this might be a critical trade deadline for Jim Nill. He's got Joe Pavelski on an expiring deal. He's got John Klingberg, and lots has been made of John's coming to the end of his contract, but also feeling a bit disrespected by the Stars. And frankly, I don't know how they fit him at his price point, given their salary structure and how overloaded they are with the existing contracts on the back end. You've got Alexander Radulov there. But all of a sudden, the team's on fire, and as we're chatting here, they're slapping the Minnesota Wild around. I think they're a playoff team, and I think they're a team, frankly, that could give a team like Colorado all they could handle. So, that changes the whole dynamic of what does that team do? Anaheim's a team that has fallen out of the playoff mix, and I don't know if they can get back in it. And new GM Pat Verbeek, he's got to deal with a couple of high end free agents, potential free agents on the back end in Hampus Lindholm and Josh Manson. He's also got Rickard Rakell up front, who's on an expiring deal. Those are players, especially Rickard Rakell. That's a player I think is going to be an important piece. You're right, Claude Giroux's the high profile guy and really at the top of the list, as he should be. But Rickard Rakell is interesting to me because he doesn't cost much. His current cap, it's like $3.8 million. So it's just he's a little bit under the radar, but he's still going to command a good return for the Ducks. It looks like they'd like to sign both those guys on the back end, Manson and Hampus Lindholm. But if Pat Verbeek can't, then he's going to move them. And that's another thing that we may not know that until the 19th or 20th or the morning of the 21st. So a really sort of fluid situation. It makes it dramatic, I think, when you're trying to handicap who's going where or what happens. But I think there are a lot of moving pieces, and we may not, sort of the tumblers may not stop rotating until literally trade deadline day.
Always interesting stuff when it comes to the trade deadline. Scott, while we had you, I did want to ask you, obviously, it's when it seems like with the rest of the sports world, anything that happens in the real world does tend to have a trickle over of impact on the games and the enjoyments that we love and we have. And that has been no different with the NHL and the hockey community with what's been going on in Ukraine and everything there. You've seen a lot of the last week or so, agents and players of Russian descent saying they've been seeing increased threats on social media and other aspects. Leagues across Canada and the U.S. seem to be kind of bolstering down and taking a stand against Russian players or a Russian interest within their league. What have you seen as far as maybe some of your conversations with executives across the hockey spectrum as far as the response to what's been going on in the Ukraine with the war between Russia and Ukraine and sort of the fallout that's happened here over the last week or so with the response from the IIHF, from junior hockey leagues and the NHL and everything that's been going on here?
Yeah, no, it's a mouthful, obviously, and what is and I think it's this is sort of a new frontier, I think, for all of us. And I certainly we have a narrow view when we think about the hockey world, and I was really pleased to see the IIHF come out and not just condemn the invasion of the Ukraine, which is to me is a no-brainer. It just still boggles the mind what is happening there and what Putin has what he's doing. It does boggle the mind, and I think it's important to be to show support, and I think it's important to do as much as possible to support Ukraine. And I thought IIHF did a nice job early. I was a bit surprised they didn't immediately strip the 2023 World Championships from Russia, but that seems inevitable to me. And, the NHL following right on the heels and talking about their business interests in Russia and how they were being ceased. And again, it's hard to imagine as the NHL and the NHLPA work towards having a World Cup of Hockey sometime in early 2024, so in 2 years from right now, give or take, that Russia could take part in that. I can't see how it could happen. But there are some blurred lines on, well, what do we, how should we be treating and what should we expect from Russian players in North America? And I know there's a lot made of Alex Ovechkin, his very public relationship with Vladimir Putin. And I think it's absolutely fair to ask questions about Ovechkin and how he feels. But I think it's also critically important to understand for so many of those players. I think of Artemi Panarin, and we already know, how outspoken he has been over the months against Vladimir Putin. But we also know the reaction, what happened when he spoke out, and that was months before this unlawful invasion of another country. And so I think you have to be careful before we start condemning players or suggesting that their contract should be, negated or whatever. You have to be very careful about what is realistic to expect from these players who've made their lives, or at least part of their lives, in North America, but who also have strong ties to Russia. And that may mean family is there. That means they may have investments, all those kinds of things. And I certainly don't profess to know what it might mean if all of a sudden Alex Ovechkin took down all his pictures. He called it a war. You can't even say that in Russia now. You can't even call it a war. You risk 15 years imprisonment. Right. So I think you have to be very careful about criticizing players for not speaking out or not saying the kinds of things that we might say ourselves or we would like to hear them say, because we don't know what the ramifications are. And I don't think I think the ramifications could be very serious, and I think they can't be taken lightly. And that makes it a very tragic, difficult situation, even a little bit harder to parse through when we're just focusing on players, NHL players from Russia who are here in North America and being asked their opinions about it.
Scott Burnside here with us on the line, brought to you by our friends over at Tide Technology. And Scott, I want to end it on a little bit more of an upbeat note. What we usually try to do with our guests, and if you will indulge us, I know you've given us so much of your time already, so if you just indulge us for a couple more minutes here. We love to usually ask our guests a random question, and just to kind of explain what that means, we kind of ask them something that's a little off the beaten path or a little related to what they do. For instance, we've had Molly Walker on from the New York Post. We asked her about her favorite press box meal. Andrew Gross from Newsday is a huge music person. We asked him a couple times about some different music topics. But Scott, you've obviously had such an illustrious career when it's come to your covering of this sport, and you've seen just about everything anyone could ever want to imagine to see in the sport. And you've seen so many different amazing events and different, exciting buildings. And I was curious, someone who's kind of been around the block a couple times and seen so much, when you look back at, the games that you covered or the events that you've been to, is there one that kind of sticks out? One that you were there, maybe not necessarily a major event that, everyone would kind of point to, a Stanley Cup final or this or that, but maybe, a little moment in the course of your career when you're at a game or at a hockey related event that kind of always stuck with you. And you kind of link back and you go, wow, that's one of my favorite moments.
Yeah, well, and I assume you're alluding to the fact that I'm old, which is okay. I accept that. No, it's totally true. Actually, I am, and it's true. I feel, and I've been lucky, and I've done lots of different things and had the opportunity to cover 3 Olympics and a couple World Cup of Hockeys and those kinds of things. One of my favorite things to do, I haven't done it in a number of years, but I did for 7 or 8 years in a row. I did Days with the Cup. So I started the first time I did it, I was with a very young Eric Stahl after the Canes win in 2006, and also spent the day with Brett Hedican, which was it was just, I'd never done it. And so I still remember it vividly. And when I run into Brett, we always talk about it. It's so funny because the cup showed up at his door, or his parents' door, I guess, in St. Paul, strapped into the front seat. The box wouldn't fit in the back, and basically was strapped into the front seat of the car, and the kids ate cereal out of it, and that was pretty cool. Since you were asking the question, I was thinking in my own mind, that's one of my favorite story that sticks with me, I suppose, as when Dave Strader came back after being diagnosed with cancer, and he did some playoff games in the spring. I won't have I don't know the exact year, but I remember sitting with him in the broadcast booth in Washington before a playoff game, and just talking about his experiences and his battle with cancer. And that was a pretty meaningful moment. Just to hear him talk about how much he loved to be in the building, and how much it was such a huge part of his life and the life of his family. And so I think about those kinds of moments because those are, they stay with you, and the game is filled with good, kind, generous people. And of course, we lose too many of them too soon. But I'm always struck by the kindness of the people in the game. It's what makes it such a joy to come and watch games and write stories and talk, with people like you about the game. So that I was just thinking about that evening with Dave Strader. So thank you for reminding me of something that was exceptionally pleasant.
Absolutely, Scott. Outstanding stuff. We really appreciate all your time tonight. It's been fantastic. And before we let you go, maybe you can just let everybody know where they can follow you on social media.
Yes, I'm on Twitter at Overtime. You know what? I'm just looking at it here because I have to figure it out, right? Like, it's like your own phone number.
That's right. You never remember it.
Yeah.
Overtime Scott B. I think that's where it is. But you can always. It's easy to find. Daily Faceoff right there every week, and as you mentioned, the Suitcase and the Scribe podcast with my good friend Mike McKenna, that we put that out every week. And periodically I make my way to Raleigh and I do some stuff for the Carolina Hurricanes, do some writing, some television and podcasting in Raleigh as well. So just try and keep my hand in the game at some level.
Love it. Awesome, Scott. Well, once again, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, and hope to talk to you again down the road.
Anytime.
All right, folks, that was Scott Burnside of Daily Faceoff. Fantastic stuff from him. Good stories, good responses, a lot of hockey.
Glad we could finally get him on.
Yes.
We've been trying for and we've been reaching out and trying and scheduling something. It's always kind of been someone's schedule doesn't line up, and it's always kind of been the back and forth of trying. So we're happy we get Scott on, and he does really tremendous work over at Daily Faceoff. Podcast is great that he does. Fantastic job there. And I actually forgot he did do some stuff for the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yes.
So that's really cool too. So we're really excited to get him on, and a lot of great stuff. Talked a lot about the trade deadline. Talked a lot about the Islanders.
Yeah.
And a really fantastic story about being able to sit down and talk with Dave Strader for a little bit during a very very tough time in his life. So all great stuff. So we really thank Scott Burnside for coming on and giving us so much of his time.
Yes, no doubt about it. And the train rolls on here at Hockey Night New York. And to swing it back to the Islanders, some huge news for Hockey Night New York.
Yeah,
Austin Danger Zarnik reclaimed on waivers, coming back.
Danger's my middle name.
Danger is his middle name. He doesn't know it, but it is here.
What if someone would ever say that to him?
Austin,
have you ever listened to this Islanders podcast? Well,
that's when we would know we made it. When Austin Zarnik knows that somebody
calls him
podcast sphere is calling him Austin Danger Zarnik.
It was just funny how that all transpired, and obviously, if anyone didn't know the reason why I'd stepped away for a couple weeks, obviously we were very, very much like every hockey team in the rest of the league, very vague with why I was gone. Upper body injury, lower body injury, that kind of thing, personal reasons.
Yeah.
Really, we can talk about it now.
Okay.
Lou had heard the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
He sense the affinity that Islander fans have had for Austin Czarnik, and he sent myself,
Danger's my middle name,
on an unofficial excursion to Seattle.
Oh.
To work on behind-the-scenes negotiations to get this done. To get them to put him back on waivers so the Islanders can get him back.
For future considerations, like under the table?
No. I can't say much, but he, we had some conversations, some backdoor dealings.
Really?
And obviously the Islanders weren't involved, of course.
So there you have it, folks. Breaking news. Christian Arnold working behind the scenes, taking his time away from covering the Brooklyn Nets to go over to Seattle and get Austin Danger Czarnik back in the fold for the Islanders. That's impressive.
I was asked.
We all thank you here.
I was asked to stop by Colorado on the way back. That did not go as successful, obviously.
For Devon Taves?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think you could try to make that happen?
I can try again.
Yeah, because they're going to be playing them tomorrow. Maybe you could, maybe talk to Joe Sakic. You have an in with Joe Sakic? Yeah. Could you wave Devon for us, please? So, yeah, Czarnik's back in the fold. And for you Islander fans out there that actually were upset about it, he's back. So there's your center depth if they need it. Barzal obviously has been out of the lineup. I don't know if that means Czarnik's going to get in there. They've been okay without Barzal, and that actually segues kind of right into what I want to talk about next is, this last little stretch here. And I spoke of it before, saying they've been playing better. I mean, the level of which you can make an argument for, but it just so happens that over the course of that time, that Matt Barzal and Zdeno Chara have been out of the lineup. What do you say about that?
I mean, it's interesting, right? Because those are two guys that have obviously been talked a lot about over the last, for the better part of the last couple months, about guys being potentially moved and, what their value would be and what their impact on this team has been and could be and this and that. And it is interesting, the timing that
right.
Listen, I think we all know the issues with Zdeno Chara, right? Like, it's no secret. He's slow. He's older. Yeah, he has a big reach. He's still somewhat physical. There are benefits to still having Zdeno Chara on an NHL roster.
Yeah.
The problem is it was never
NHL ice.
It was never. It was never this particular specific NHL roster. Zdeno Chara doesn't fit with the Islanders' NHL roster, and that's kind of been everyone's known that
he definitely doesn't replace what they lost. That's the issue.
And that's the problem.
Like, maybe he does fit if Leddy was still here or somebody comparable that can move the puck, that still has foot speed, that can put points up, right? That can help you successfully exit the zone and break out. Maybe he does fit. Maybe he can be a bottom pairing lefty. And then I get it. But maybe him and Green are the guys that kind of go back and forth in that bottom pairing. Again, it doesn't matter. It's all moot. But yes.
Do I think, to answer your question, right, do I think there's a direct correlation to the Islanders' somewhat success over the last couple games and the sudden disappearance of Zdeno Chara and Josh Bailey, almost Mafia-esque at the timing? No, I don't think there's I don't think that I don't necessarily know if there's a direct correlation between the two coming out of the lineup at the same time and the turnaround success.
I will say, it, of course, has nothing to do with Barzal coming out. They're only going to be better with him in the lineup, even during their struggles. Matt Barzal makes the New York Islanders better.
Yeah.
End of discussion, right? But there's plenty of teams out there, good teams, that can win despite their stars being out. And I guess you can look at that as a positive sign, right? They were able to find a way to win a couple of games with Barzal out. Zdeno Chara, on the other hand, I think it's worth discussing that maybe they're better off with him up in the press box a little more than they are with him on the ice. And Aho's been able to get a chance, like I said before. I think he's playing better than he did prior. I think he's calmed down a little bit. We talked about earlier in the season rookie mistakes, maybe playing a little too with maybe a little lack of confidence, maybe trying to do too much out there. I think he's performed better in this most recent go-around to getting onto the ice. So I think you could make an argument. I would listen to somebody trying to tell me that, But does that mean that Chara's going to be out now for an extended time because of it? No, I think once he gets healthy, he'll probably get back in. We don't know when that's going to be because, as we've learned, day-to-day on the Islanders doesn't necessarily mean day-to-day.
Right.
You look at Pollock's injury, he was supposed to be 4 to 6 weeks. It ended up being, 10 to 12 or whatever it was?
Something like that,
And there's setbacks every now and then.
Well, also, I think he got COVID at one point, so I think that delayed.
That was within the time he was still expected to be
But
out.
I think that
like
pushed
people were
back-
happy. People were like, "Oh, well, at least he got it now because he wasn't coming back anyway."
But I think it pushed back his kind of work on the ice, right? Because once you have COVID, you can't be out on the ice, you can't use the team facility, you're quarantined, whatever. So I think that also added to the fact that you're taking away 5 or whatever. I forget had they shortened the quarantine period at that point? I forget.
Right.
But you lose a certain amount of time. So if it was still 14 days, 10 days, whatever it was, that's 2 extra weeks, which would kind of line up with how it ended up anyway.
Yeah.
And then you add on, all right, he still has to kind of rehab. He still has to ramp up. Jesus, he has to. That's the basketball coming out and talking, But he still has to get back into that shape where he's ready to go, and so definitely none of that helps. None of that helps. And as we know, the NHL is very, very transparent with anything related to injury.
Right. And I guess at the end of it, and I see some good questions coming in about this topic, which we'll hit right now, but at the end of the day, big congrats to Chara for breaking the record.
Yeah.
1,652? Most games ever played as a defenseman. He passes Chris Chelios. They had a nice little ceremony for him before the game.
Which was nice, yeah.
Yesterday, they presented him with some gifts. He had
and
the
it was
family
cool that
out
he
there.
could do that with the Islanders, the team that drafted him. And
yeah.
So that
for
was, it was
sure.
a nice little touch.
Yeah, absolutely. So big congrats to him, regardless of what you might think about him now, the way he's playing for the Islanders. What an amazing career he's had, Stanley Cup champion, and big congrats, man. That is no small feat whatsoever. But to see these questions coming in during this discussion, I like it. Robin Salo was quoted saying that he's essentially not too happy about being in Bridgeport, which makes sense to me. Good for him. Now, and I'm, it's cool that he felt comfortable enough to say it. Because
I'm sorry, I missed this. Where did he say this?
He was. I don't want to misspeak here. I don't remember if he was interviewed by like a Swedish or
that would make sense.
Paper, because I feel like that might have been the case.
And that's usually where, especially
you get
like
the
a player
more
like
candid
that, yeah.
answers. Yeah. Now again, I don't have it in front of me. It may have been elsewhere, but I think it was maybe a Swedish.
Maybe someone in the chat knows, but that
Right.
lines up. I was just curious more or less because
he was essentially asked, about being back in Bridgeport after spending all that time with the Islanders, and again, I'm paraphrasing here, but he was basically like, it sucks. He would rather be up with the Islanders, and of course that's the obvious answer. Who wouldn't?
Right.
But he felt comfortable enough to say it, and he wasn't complaining. He wasn't trashing the organization or saying I should be there or they made a big mistake or anything like that. He was just being blunt about the fact that he'd rather be on the island. And again, why wouldn't he? So good for him. I mean, and I think he said something along the lines of I'm just motivated to do what I have to. Sorry, finish. Yeah, there you go.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just Thank you.
He basically said, I'm motivated to get back there because he prefers it to Bridgeport. So good for him. And he's a guy who I think has a future with this team. And maybe it's not right now because of the logjam they have up there. And, now he's going to get heavy minutes in Bridgeport, which is a good thing. He should be playing. That's always the mantra, right? These guys should be playing. These guys should be playing. And maybe now it becomes a little more of a showcase for the rest of the season for Aho because he can play in games that really don't mean as much.
It's interesting too because I'm not saying this is the case because I guess from what everyone, at least from what you're saying, Sean, it wasn't necessarily an interview or a comment that was said in a tone that I guess would come off as aggressive or trashing the organization or whatever the case may be, however you want to characterize it. But you have to remember too. Now you look at the situation with Salo. You have to think back to the Russian player who was here at the beginning of the season. His name escapes me, of course, right now. He had come in for a couple months. The Islanders didn't play him. I gotta look it up. You gotta vamp for like 2 seconds. Give me a second to think of this player's name.
Okay, fair enough.
You keep talking. I will.
I will keep talking. So yes, it was a Finnish interview, not a Swedish interview. And the problem is, I just mixed up the Scandinavian nation.
Yeah, that's insulting.
that he was from. That's my mistake. But I'm seeing some interesting back and forth about this whole Salo thing now. Trottier 19 actually just threatened me physically. He said he will put me through the glass like Trotz did to the Vancouver guy for the third cup.
Listen, Trotty, I'll hold him down. I got your back. I got you. We'll make this happen. Anatoly Golishev is who I was thinking of.
There you go.
Anatoly Golishev. Remember, after he left,
he was a lot more outspoken, and he had some. I mean, look, if the things that he said were true,
but to my point, it sets an interesting scenario here where. Obviously, Salo didn't say it like that, I guess. So it's hard to kind of, we're kind of comparing two different things here. But still, it's an interesting pattern you're almost noticing, right? Where,
again, I don't think it's really not the same because I think Salo was more just asked about comparing the two, how do you feel about being sent down? Whereas according to Golishev, he was put through the ringer as in, I'm in, I'm out, I'm gonna stay, right. I'm gonna be a part of this team, I'm not. I think Salo understands where he's at. I think he's just unhappy he's not still there, but he's not complaining about it. He's not giving the Islanders organization a hard time about it or saying, trade me or anything like that. It's just it sucks that I'm here. That's all. I want to be back. He liked his taste of the island, and he wants to get back there full time.
Well, I mean, but I guess more or less I'm reacting to the way it was phrased in the chat because a lot of the way you saw it asked about it is, Trottier 19 thoughts about Salo whining about.
And Jeremy 13 cleared it up a little bit too. He said Long Island is a nicer place to live. Bridgeport, not really nice to live in terms of city.
Fair.
Which is fair.
Yes, Bridgeport, Connecticut is not known for their pristine beaches.
Now, is that something that hockey players are traditionally groomed to kind of leave out of the discussion? Yes. I mean, he essentially kind of trashed on Bridgeport, right, by saying it's not as nice a place to live. I mean, maybe that's something your PR department wants you to keep to yourself. But at the end of the day, I mean, he didn't really say anything overly terrible here where he's going to be reprimanded. They might just say, hey, listen, keep that part to yourself next time. But I don't think he's going to be in the bad graces of the organization now because he was blunt about how he feels about Long Island compared to Bridgeport.
But I guess where I was going, and I kind of got sidetracked too, where I was going with the Golishev and sort of the Salo comment and the similarity is that I think you're going to see more and more players, especially now in kind of this changing era, start to be more outspoken about where they feel their development is and where they feel they should be, publicly speaking anyway, where they feel they should be in terms of NHL, AHL level. And I think you're seeing that shift with a lot of players in a lot of different aspects of this sport. I think you're seeing that shift more towards players being comfortable and confident enough to say, listen, I should be at the NHL level. Mm-hmm. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's a whole other discussion. But right now, I think it's interesting to see the way people kind of frame even just that comment, right? Calling it whining. He was obviously asked about it, and he answered honestly.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of always the issue I have when people criticize athletes for making comments and being honest, because the biggest knock on athletes or hockey players especially is the lack of personality and the lack of depth in their answer, because I think a lot of those guys understand or watch what happens when they are honest and someone doesn't like what you say. It's not worth the time or the effort trying to defend yourself or whatever the case may be. So but I think where I was going, and I think I misspoke a lot, is that kind of growing, the shift in player mentality of kind of just that old mentality of being like, just shut up and go play.
Right.
They're going to answer honestly when they're asked questions, and I think that's a good thing.
Look, there should be a good balance between it all. I mean, this is a discussion.
I also like that like that Salo's confident enough to say,
yes,
I want to be back there. I think I should be there.
Exactly.
That should, more than anything, as an Islander fan, as a hockey fan, you should be excited about that, because that player, Salo in this case, has that swagger. I mean, Barry Trotz loves to use that term all the time.
Sure.
Jack Capuano loved to use that term all the time. He has that swagger that he's confident enough in himself.
He's not a passenger.
He's not a passenger. And he wants to be up there. And that should excite people, because, listen, his focus is getting back on the NHL, whether it's because he doesn't love the life in Bridgeport, or whatever the case
Whatever
may be,
motivates you, buddy.
he wants to be back there. And I think if it wasn't for the comments or the perceived way the comments were taken, I think people, there's a lot of people that agree Salo should be here. I don't know why he's not. At this point in the year, when you know your season's over and you're just developing for the future, Salo should be here. There's no question about it.
Well, I think he will be back. That's for sure. So thanks for bringing up that discussion, folks, in the chat, because it was a good one. Good stuff.
Yeah.
So before we head into our other segments on the show, I did want to talk about this whole resurgence we're seeing from Kyle Palmieri and Zach Parise. And, I talked about it before. Both of them. But Palmieri's putting up all these goals now. He would have had another 2 if they weren't disallowed.
Palmieri would have
almost
had a hat trick.
Well, he almost had a disallowed goal hat trick. He only needed one more.
That's
And I was ready to ask Eric Hornick, the stat on has any one player had 3 goals disallowed in the same game? I'm sure a guy's had 2 in the past. I'm sure it's rare, but it would have been interesting to see if there was a guy who had 3 different goals disallowed. That would be something to hang your hat on.
I mean, if I was that guy, I'd be pretty pissed. I don't even know if that's something you even now after post-career, you're like, yeah, that's still something pretty butthurt about.
Definitely an interesting thing to see. But with that in mind, with him, extremely, with him performing better, I mean, not only just putting goals in, he's been more noticeable. He had some play yesterday against the Blues where he almost did his best Matt Barzal impression, where he skated around pretty much the entire offensive zone, but also doing toe dragging, making some nice moves with his hands, which you really don't typically see out of Kyle Palmieri. He's more of like a lunch paler guy, right? Crashing the net and whatnot. And it really stuck out. And I think what I want to kind of talk about is, and as part of the Islander country here, we've seen this time and time again over the course of time, and maybe a guy you can talk about is like Mariusz Czerkawski, right? He's a guy who would put up like 30, 35 goals and, a completely lost season, right? Like probably back in like 96 or whatever it was, where Czerkawski's putting up these great numbers, but the pressure's not there, and that's what I'm talking about. So the second half comes, Parise's putting up numbers, Palmieri's putting up numbers. Is it because they finally found their game? Is it because luck the puck started going in their direction, the puck breaks or whatever you want to call it, the puck luck?
Puck luck.
Where instead of Palmieri, the hockey gods, instead of the pucks going into the goalie's chest, it's finally finding its way into the net? Or is it because the pressure's off? Because now there's not as much, pressure in winning these games because they kind of know they're out of it already. Now, I'm going to try to answer my own question first and then bring it to you. I want to get my own thoughts in there. But these guys are in their 30s. They've been in the league for a long time. I don't think that stuff factors in anymore. I think it's more just they found their game. I don't think they're just lucky now because the pressure's off. I think that this is something we probably would have seen whether they were in it or out of it. But please, go ahead. What do you think?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I think the Islanders are a bit more comfortable. After you go through such... I know in the past I've been hesitant to give any sort of credence to the idea of starting off on a road trip for 13 games and kind of use that as an excuse, but it's obviously tiring and has an impact. The pressure that comes along with opening a new building and, all the expectations on the outside for this team and this and that. I think it's a little bit of a combination of everything that's going on right now. I think they're a little more comfortable. There's finally some not as much. There's so much turnover in the first half of the season. There was so much chaos that there's finally a little calm. And I think that absolutely makes players more comfortable, whether they're a rookie, whether they're a veteran. I think that's a factor. I think absolutely would say, I think it's because some of those guys know that the season is not going to go the way everyone expected it to. And so there is a little less pressure. And so... those mistakes, I mean, they're amplified, but it's not to the sense of, well, now not only these mistakes amplified, but they're costing us a playoff spot, this or that. So there's a little more free reign, and I think you've seen it in years past with this team. Like I said, it's disappointing to kind of see the take those kind of tiptoe back a little bit to harken back to days that weren't as great for Islander fans, but I think there's absolutely some of that going on in addition to guys finally getting their rhythm going a little bit. But and then I think part of that is just they know the pressure's off them a little bit. Okay, fair enough. And I think it was in Jeremy 13. There's dad power.
Made a good point. Dad power. And Jeremy 13 made a good point. Parise has been consistently playing well all year. It's just that the pucks are going in. I mean, we've been saying it since the beginning. Even when he wasn't scoring, busting his tail all night, playing really well. And I said it recently, too. Like, if they had
He's a second-half player.
just like you said, self-proclaimed second-half player. But I said it not too long ago, too. If they were in playoff contention and they did make the playoffs, Parise would have been huge in the playoffs for this team. He's exactly that kind of player. With the way he's been playing during the season, the guy probably would have been potting goals, putting up points, big time.
I'm curious. Well, so in that vein, how much do you think that would have changed the course of that 2020 playoff run? Having him on, and like if let's say go back in 2020, no one knows the world's about to end. The Islanders go out and they get Pajot, JG Pajot at the deadline. There's rumors that the trade for Zach Parise was in the works. They couldn't financially figure it out.
Right.
Let's say somehow, some way, they use some sort of witchcraft to make the numbers work, and Zach Parise ends up an Islander. He's obviously going to have, like everyone else did, at those first couple games, he's going to be miserable, right? And then the world ends.
Right.
Then everyone goes to the bubble, and the Islanders are miraculous. Do you think that Zach Parise would have made much of a difference back then?
It's a good question, and I don't know. I mean, the first question you have to ask, actually, funny enough, is does it have an effect on their place in the standings? Now, not remembering how the regular season standings ended that year, would he have made a difference in the amount of points they had? Would they had a different opponent in the first round? I guess at the end of
so.
Whether they would or they wouldn't have, if they get to, I guess the question is once they get to face Tampa, right? What happens then?
Yeah.
I mean, look, I've seen nothing but good things out of him this season. And you're talking 2 years ago now, right? Where he maybe has even a little more pep in his step, right? And maybe he's the difference to at least extend that series to 7 games against Tampa. It doesn't end in 6. Or it could go the other way. I mean, look, they had a chance both times. Parise would have made a difference overall in their playoff performance, no doubt about it. Having a guy like him with his veteran pedigree, the way we've seen him play night in, night out with this team, again, I think he is tailor-made for the playoffs. And I guess we've come to learn that may be the one problem with this team is that they have too many guys
that are made for the playoffs.
Who are made almost too much. I mean, it sounds so strange to say, but almost made too much for the playoffs and not enough for the regular season. So yeah, would he have made a difference? Sure. Would it have been the difference between winning the cup or not in 2020? That's hard for me to say.
It's just a fun little experiment.
Of course it is.
And Jeremy, to answer your question, was it MJ or MJ Beckman? Whoever it was Ladd for Parise was the
and a lot of other crap. Going.
There was a
going
lot
around.
of there was a lot of financial maneuvering that needed to be done.
And if that happens, does Kyle Palmieri come the next year? And does Jordan that could have changed the trajectory of this team last year too completely. If they got him back then, we don't know what else they would have done since then where what the team looks like now. But fun question. And could have been different.
In some alternate universe out there, the Islanders did in fact get Zach Parise.
We need to check in with the TVA and ask them what the alternate timeline would have looked like if Zach Parise was on the team in 2020.
But no, it's a fun question. I thought it was interesting just because you brought it up and excuse me, and certainly 2 years ago, Zach Parise would have been interesting, and yeah, it's certainly an interesting scenario. We just also want to remind everybody, of course, coming up a little bit later in the show is Questions Brewing, brought to you by our great partners.
Yes,
in Oyster Bay Brewing Company. We absolutely love them, and we love when you guys participate in the chat and interact with us.
That's my favorite part of the show.
And so we want to remind you can get your Questions Brewing by just throwing them into the chat right now. Put Questions Brewing at the beginning so we know
and
to get those.
As long as Christian does his job to take
I won't
note
refresh
of them.
the page. Whatever. All right, go. It happened once.
Then we'll actually be able to have a good
We've been doing
segment.
this all season. I forgot. I've messed it up one time, and I'll never let it down.
Because as you know, I'm always flawless with producing the show, right? With
you
the
never
buttons
hit
and
a wrong
everything.
button and never cued the wrong thing up.
No.
Went to the wrong screen.
That's never
I'm
happened.
Still not. Yeah. Also, another alternate universe, Trotty at 19. The Islanders got Vladimir Tarasenko.
I mean, that would have probably been a bigger changer than Parise. That probably would have made a bigger difference.
More wild. There's probably another alternate universe out there where Doug Wade is still the coach. John Tavares left for Toronto, and the Islanders still ended up with Vladimir Tarasenko somewhere.
Well, thankfully, Loki never caused us to be living in that timeline right now. We're where we are. Yes, we're where we are. But speaking,
and Garth Snow is still the GM somehow.
Why do you want us to suffer so much pain?
Oh, but they got Vladimir Tarasenko.
Okay, so So, speaking of segments, I think it's time to move on to What's on Tap.
And now, it's time for What's on Tap, brought to you by RJ Daniels, American Bar and Grill.
That's right, folks. It's time for What's on Tap. So, Christian, here's one of the other few jobs that you need to do on this program. What's on tap for the New York Islanders?
Well, what's on tap is the Islanders will play hockey games. And not just any hockey games, but they'll
You've
play.
used that joke before.
They'll play. Wow, okay. I was kind of just giving myself a second to get to the right part of it.
I know what you were doing. Yeah.
All right, so just call me out or whatever. Real dick move.
Wow.
Who said that? No curse on this show. The Islanders face the Colorado Avalanche tomorrow night. That's March 7th at the UBS Arena at 7:30. The Ubes, the Devon Tays revenge tour continues, I would imagine, after getting a goal against his former team. The last time these two
It's not
teams
fair.
played.
Those 2 second-round draft picks don't get revenge yet. Well, I think one was put in a deal somewhere, but they still have to bide their time.
They'll come back. Those draft picks I don't know, get traded somewhere else. They'll come back and score twice on the Islanders one game in the future. Speaking of alternate timelines, Islanders also host the Columbus Blue Jackets on Thursday at 7:30 at UBS Arena, and the Winnipeg Jets, who still remain. The Islanders haven't seen the Winnipeg Jets since, what was that?
The
November?
game that you always love, calling the best game of the season.
Because it was.
That's your favorite game of the year. That game against the Jets.
Well, because we watched it with Donnie Bagels.
We did, Mr. Bagels
at the
himself.
Blue Line Deli.
Yes, that's right.
And it was a lot of fun. So.
It was a good time.
Forgive me for enjoying quality time with my friends, but I'll just go jump off a bridge or whatever. Damn. And of course, the Islanders play the Anaheim Mighty Ducks on next Sunday at 7:30. We are still trying to figure out what our showtime will be like for that show.
Right, we were kind of discussing that beforehand. We're still figuring out next week. You have that 7:30 game against the Ducks. We may have to make some maneuvers, but we'll figure it out. Don't worry, we'll keep you posted.
So yeah, Islanders have a busy slate of games coming up. All these games. I mean, it's hard to even get really amped up about a lot of these games anymore. It's exciting to see the Anaheim Ducks in person, I guess. Devon Tays' return to Long Island is always a nice touch.
Well, you get Long Island's own magician on ice in Anaheim.
Milano.
Well, Sonny Milano isn't the other dude from Long
Island
too?
yeah. I think so.
What's his name?
I was just gonna.
Trevor, Travis, the dude who was at the All-Star game, who did the crazy dodgeball goal. What was his name? Zegras. Yeah. Zegras. Trevor Zegras. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's a Long Island dude, right?
I think so.
Or at least a New York dude. Or I'm completely giving misinformation. So there you go. Yeah, Zegras. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's Sonny
Thank
Milano
you guys.
From Massachusetts.
No, Milano is definitely from Long Island. That I know, but I thought Zegras was too. So, see, this is another great... Okay, Zegras is not from Long Island. So that's just me spouting out, misinformation on the show again. But this is actually another great reason why we have the chat, so that we can be corrected in real time.
So we don't have to pay a producer.
So that even if we look like morons for a brief moment, somebody can bail us out at the end. So now I just need somebody to say whether or not he's from New York. So at least I don't look that wrong. But I thought he was. Obviously, I'm wrong. But Sonny Milano. Long Island. The pride of Long Island. Sonny Milano.
Good Lord.
Westchester. There we go. Bedford, New York. See? It was New York. Yes. So I was only half wrong. Or glass half full, I was half right.
There you go.
Right. So, but also on tap, Mr. Arnold, big news here. We posted it on the social, but now we're going to talk about it here. Islanders versus Rangers indoor tailgate party on St. Patrick's Day at the Long Island Marriott next to the Coliseum. That's right. We're bringing it back to the region of the barn, not the barn itself. But we're going back to the general area. Going to be a lot of fun. Thursday, March 17th, fundraiser to benefit the Long Island Rough Riders sled hockey. The fun starts at 5 p.m. Our friends at Drive for 5 and Isles Fanatics will be in the house hanging out with us. It's sponsored by Patron Tequila, Lost Farmer Brewing Company. There's going to be tailgate games brought to you by Patron, like cornhole. That's going to be fun, all that good stuff. There's going to be a 50-50 auction, giveaways. Food and drink specials. Lost Farmer's going to give a free beer on the Islanders' first goal, so you know they're going to get shut out. They're definitely getting shut out that night.
Sounds about right.
But that's
I didn't want to be the one to say that because you always accuse me of such negativity.
It's fun. It's funny. But you're going to have there's going to be part of the prize is a full team autographed stick will be available as part of the raffles. So much like the raffles we've been doing at our viewing parties, there's going to be plenty of different prizes to get involved in. There might be some other surprises coming too that we can't talk about yet because they're not official. But it's going to be a fun night. Come down, watch the Islanders versus the Rangers at the Marriott next to the Coliseum. We're going to do a pregame show.
I'm looking at my phone to look at something with the event, so I don't want to get yelled at for looking at my phone.
Well, yeah, that's nice at least. At least you're giving us, a heads up here, and you're not just acting like you're completely disinterested in doing the show. But yeah, guys, come on down. St. Patrick's Day, have some fun. Maybe there'll be some green beer. We'll see.
I was going to say, there's all these great sponsors, Patron and Lost Farmers. There's no Jameson on the docket.
Listen,
St. Patrick's Day.
I don't run the show over there. But Patron's a great look. Patron tequila is fantastic.
Patron.
Yeah, it's gonna be great to have them involved. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So come on down, and that's it for what's on tap. There you go. Yeah, we had to replace the button with the interview, so I don't have the outro for that.
No, I just
for that
did it.
segment.
It's fine.
You did a great job.
That was What's on Tap.
That's
presented by RJ Daniels, American Grill,
American Bar and Grill,
whatever.
Pretty good, not bad. So we're having a lot of fun. We're having a lot of laughs. Why don't we take a break? We'll settle down a little bit here, and then we'll come back with the hero of the week.
The hero of the week.
That's
brought to you by
Stop
Blue Line Deli, American Bar and Grill.
Folks, we want to thank you so much for tuning into twitch.tv/Hockey Night NY and your favorite podcast providers. Hope you're having as much fun as we are here on the show. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Jinx.
Customer service is the backbone of any great business, and reliable telecommunication is essential to keeping your client base happy. Introducing Thai Technology, a low-cost, flexible internet phone service founded on the idea that every customer deserves exceptional service while providing simple setup and management and easy integration to clients across the country. Thai Technology will not only create a custom solution tailored to your specific needs, but will partner with you to provide a competitive edge to you and your clients. And if you need support, you won't be routed to an automated call center in another country. You'll get a live representative that had a personal hand in building your account. So Islander fans, if your business is looking for a change from companies like Spectrum, Verizon, or Optimum, Thai Technology is offering 3 free months of service for any of its affordable packages. Just call 516-856-7800. That's 516-856-7800. Or visit them on the web at thaitechnology.com. That's Thai, T-I-E technology.com. Thai Technology, the right choice for your internet phone service.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. When you hear this song, that means it's time for the Hero of the Week, brought to you by the Blue Line Deli and Bagels half-price hero. This week is the Seany, featuring grilled roast beef, sauteed onion, mushrooms, fresh mozzarella cheese on a toasted garlic hero. Get it for half price all week at the Huntington location starting tomorrow. That is Monday through next week, where we will announce a brand new half-off hero. Stop on in, mention Hockey Night New York for half off the Seany. So, Mr. Arnold, tell us all, who is your hero of the week?
Batman.
Did you see it yet?
No, I gotta see it. Everyone's been raving about it.
I've seen very good comments on social media. Thankfully, I haven't had anything spoiled yet.
That's just good.
Yeah.
Because I already got something spoiled.
I don't want to hear it.
No, I'm not going to tell you.
I want to hear
because
it.
I was so mad when I saw it. I was pretty annoyed.
I have successfully dodged the spoilers, but it can't be Batman, Christian.
But, well, you could say this gentleman is a young Bruce Wayne.
Is that right?
That's what I hear anyway.
Oh, okay. What's his name?
Just kidding. It's Oliver Wahlstrom. Obviously, he's been going through a bit of a rough stretch. What was it, 11, 12 game goal drought? There we go. There he is. 11, 12 game goal drought that he was going through. Finally breaks through on Saturday against the St. Louis Blues in an effort, and a very good effort from the New York Islanders in 8:52 of work. So he had 5 shots on net, which is good because the Islanders.
He's the guy who wants shooting the puck.
Yeah, the Islanders don't necessarily shoot the puck a lot, and he does. So it was good.
We need him to shoot more.
And it's important for him to kind of see him break out of those droughts.
Yes.
Because he's kind of gone through a lot of ups and downs this season. Excuse me. A lot of ups and downs this season. And it's always a positive, especially with someone as talented and someone you're really going to want to rely on going forward, like Wahlstrom, to kind of get himself out of that and be given the opportunity. Now, he's playing 8:52 of ice time.
Not ideal, not what you want.
But you make the most of that. And
he has, for the vast majority of the season, because a lot of people complaining about the lack of ice time he's been getting. But even in those shorter stints on a particular night, he was still able to get a goal, get shots on net. So, look, I think ultimately he's going to end up being a good one, just like his co-draftee Noah Dobson, or Nobson as we affectionately call him here.
Yeah,
he's just
not because we can't speak and we always fumble words.
No, that was intentional from the get-go. But I think he's just on a little bit of a longer trajectory compared to Noah Dobson. But all in all, I think he's going to be a gamer for this team. We'll see if it's going to be a top 3, top 6.
Should we be concerned that T. Boyle's asking people if they're watching The Walking Dead?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe he's lost interest. Maybe he's tuned out. I don't know. I mean, look, the chat is free. You can talk about whatever you want. So, Walking Dead, sure, have at it. But it's time for me to give my hero, Christian.
And that is?
My hero is Ross the Boss Johnston. Now, there was plenty of good candidates for this week, but if you go all the way back to Sunday for that game against the Ducks, which we did the viewing party for over at RJ Daniels,
that's right.
Ross the Boss had 2 assists, one of which was beautiful, made a beautiful play, cross-ice pass to Casey Cizikas for a goal. Big part of that 4-0 win. And look, let's face it, this is a guy who isn't going to get the hero of the week that
Very often.
So I want to give credit when it's due to Ross the Boss Johnson. I think this is a guy we're going to see in more games next year. After some changes we might see with this team, I think he finally might be the guy who comes off the bench a little bit more, or out of the press box a little bit more next year and sees some more time with this team.
Well, I mean, if things kind of go, I think as a lot of people expect them to go, I think he's the guy that takes that Cal Clutterbuck spot in the 4th line. If Clutterbuck gets traded or dealt or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? He's not back next year, then I think Ross Johnson is the kind of the go-to guy to fill in that role, and kind of what we talked about very, very early on in the season when they announced that contract is that was, I think, to me anyway, the first indication that the Islanders are looking beyond or looking at life post the best 4th line in hockey. So Ross Johnson certainly deserved it. He had a hell of a game that night, and when he's on the ice, we joke, but when he is on the ice,
things happen.
He makes things happen.
And Mel Armenia 22 points out that bad things happened on the ice in the game against Colorado, and I guess for a guy like that, you're going to get that every now and then.
Yeah. Also, I think Barry Trotz should have been a candidate for Hero of the Week, just for one of the most memorable quotes of the year.
He's been churning out a couple of quotes recently, actually.
The one about the turnovers and ex-wives.
That was the big one. That was the main one.
Yeah, so that's if I had a second nominee for Hero of the Week, that would be my second nominee.
A lot of candidates, but there you have it, folks. Ross the Boss, Oliver Wahlstrom. If you disagree, sorry. What can I tell you? But remember, folks, it is brought to you by the Blue Line Deli and Bagels half-price hero, the Celly with grilled roast beef, sautéed onion, mushrooms, fresh mozzarella on a toasted garlic hero. Stop in a Huntington from now until next week.
Word.
You'll mention Hockey Night in New York and get half price if you do.
Word.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So that does it for the hero of the week. Mel Armenia 22. Maybe that's the quote of the week. You know what? Probably a prime candidate for that. And even though it's not a quote from the show, we might be able to make an exception. Because usually quote of the week is quote, something somebody said on the show. Usually something brilliant that I said. Rarely anything that Christian said.
That's fair.
And half the time, maybe, a quote from the guest. But yes, we might be able to make an exception and use Barry.
Well, the
Trotz.
guest is usually the smartest one on the show.
We'll have a meeting throughout the week, and we'll decide who's going to have the quote of the week. So moving on from the hero
of the week.
Maybe we just dive straight into questions, Bruin.
Questions, Bruin.
We talked about the games, plenty of deadline talk with Scott Burnside. I'm not sure if we need to dive any further into that, unless you had something you wanted to opine on, Christian, as far as that goes.
I did not, actually.
Yeah, that was my expected answer there.
Wow. All right.
Yeah, we covered a lot of stuff here. I mean, we got the games, and again, the Ducks, the Avs, the Canucks, and the Blues. I mean, you just look at the Avs and the Canucks games, and those are 2 games that they could have came away with, if not for some mistakes here and there, if not for some bad luck, if not for some problems in the Toronto video review booth. As far as the Colorado game goes, there were
Yeah, that was rough. That was rough. Because it absolutely sucked the momentum right out of the room for the Islanders, right? Because that was the Avalanche game, or was that the Vancouver game? That was the Avalanche game.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that absolutely sucked the air right out of the room for the Islanders, who had momentum. And then what happens? Avalanche go and score the other way.
Yeah.
Rough.
Yeah. Yeah. When you lose a break like that against a team like the Avalanche, it's probably going to hurt you.
Bad calls, yes. Sign of a massive conspiracy against the Islanders, no.
Yeah, that's.
I just want to make that.
I got you. Yeah, I'm with you there. So look, decent week, 500 week. You had a tough team against Colorado. They lost to. They could have won that game. Probably should have had a better outing against the Canucks. That didn't go their way. And you had that goal where Varlamov kind of lost his balance and fell. Not the first time that's happened with him, too, where he kind of gets like frozen and he kind of falls back. And
it's happened a couple times.
You're right. It did earlier on in the year, I remember. I don't know what it is with him where that happens sometimes. I mean, not a reason to say get rid of him, even though they're probably going to do that anyway. But
they
yeah.
have the greatest goaltender in the world, Ilya Sorokin.
According to Donnie Bagels, yes. But yeah, I mean, look, 500 week. It's just a matter now, again, pull out the positives that you can. Look for the development of Oliver Wahlstrom. Look for the development of Kiefer Bellows. I think he's still playing better than he was. Mm-hmm. He's earned himself more time, which is good. He's playing out there. Noah Dobson keeps getting better by the game. He looks excellent out there. He's in double digits in goals now. He's going to be a great weapon on that right side. He's only getting more confident. You look at Pulock, Dobson, and Mayfield as your three right side defensemen. That's nice.
Yeah.
The age is right.
You can live with that.
Absolutely. You got two guys that can put up a lot of points. You got a guy who can be on the penalty kill in Mayfield. Right side's nice now. Now it's just a matter of repairing the left side. It did look nice in previous years when you still had Taves over there and Letty over there. But they kind of got to do something about that left side because Pelech is kind of on a little bit of an island right now. As far as, he needs some support behind him. Yeah, he needs some backup there. Maybe it's Salah one day. Maybe it's Aho one day if he ever gets that chance. But, I mean, look, the days of Andy Green and Zdeno Char are got to be fast closing here. I mean, I would be – it's a failed offseason, I feel, if Andy Green is brought back to be in a top 6 role next year. If you want him there for the 7th D-man if somebody gets hurt, okay. Fine. But there's got to be some younger, faster guys back there, somebody who can move the puck, and hopefully Lou Lamoriello can. Yes, younger would be nice.
Faster.
Yes, all of the above. But you're seeing great development out of Dobson. Oh, we got it. Yeah, we got it. All of those adjectives would be very beneficial to the Islanders team. So, but yes, we're watching these games now. You got whatever it is, 30-something games left. You got to try to pull the positives from where you can. Obviously, there's a lot of anticipation between now and the trade deadline. Yeah. Who's going to go? Who's getting showcased, if anybody? What kind of assets do they get back? What can they use to turn around over the summer to hopefully improve this team and hopefully pick up where they left off at the end of last year, right? Reset button this year. Next year, they get back in the playoff mix, and hopefully they fulfill those cup dreams that we're all thinking about right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's now where everyone's focus is. There's no, at least there's it's got to be, because you can't let a repeat of this year happen again next year, because then I think that's sort of that turn, because I know we've talked about it before. The window, I think, is closing closing very quickly after this season.
It's on the second half of it. You know what I mean? It's on the tail end with this group.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. So it'll be interesting. It's tough to say or tough to know what Lou Lamoriello is going to do, because Lou Lamoriello is, he's the Don. Nothing gets nothing gets out without his authorization. So he, I think he obviously had a plan this season. Things didn't go according to that plan. I think we've obviously talked about it before. The fact that the team that was on the ice this year, I don't think was plan A, B, or C, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
some of the
we
personnel.
said that. Yep.
So now is the time to kind of get ahead of the game, try and start setting the chess pieces for next offseason, which is going to be a critical one for the Islanders, and turning that page and taking that next step forward. And it'll be interesting to watch, to say the least. It really will.
Yeah, and Chaudier 19 makes a good point. NY has to prove they can play decent for 82 games a season, not just a bubble or short season, which is something we focused on here. Yeah, they need to be a regular season and a playoff team.
Yeah, that's the problem.
That is it. The strangest issue. I never thought that's even like something that would be discussed. How a team could be a playoff team but not a regular season team. Because you would think, well, if they're a playoff team, they're obviously a regular season team.
Right, but there's such a disparity between the playoffs and the regular
games.
season. And I'd love to know why that is, right? Like, I would love to know what the difference in the mentality and in the physicality and why there is such a shift, a cosmic shift.
It's a combination. It's just tighter hockey overall, where I think you're playing more, and this is kind of how Barry Trotz's teams are coached. You're playing to you're playing to minimize your mistakes. You're playing to play from the defense and the goaltending out, in the sense that you capitalize on your turnovers, you capitalize on your rushes the other way to get your goals. And obviously that's not the 100% blueprint. It doesn't always go that way. But you're minimizing the mishaps on your end of the ice so you can capitalize on what's going on the other end. And when you have the referees swallowing their whistles, that means you can play a little more chippy. You can play a little more grinded out hockey.
They changed an entire rule because of Scott Mayfield from last season.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
But that's those battles in front of the net. I mean, that was the exact reason
and they have guys that have been proven in those instances. Again, the Palmieris, the Parisis, the Anders Lees. Brock Nelson's been clutch during the season and in the playoffs, big time in the playoffs. And you even have guys like Josh Bailey who have stepped up in the playoffs, no matter how uneven of a season he's having this year. They have guys that when they get in there, they know how to play. No matter how you are supposed to play in the playoffs, this team knows how to do it. And it doesn't always change. J.G. Pageau, another perfect example. A guy who a lot of these guys are just balls to the wall hockey players, right? Where they get down in the dirty areas, they play hard in front of the net, they win puck battles, all that stuff. And that's usually what translates to wins in the playoffs, where great regular season team, the Toronto Maple Leafs, great regular season team, Colorado Avalanche.
Yeah.
Could they be a great playoff team too? Remains to be seen. We'll find out. But so far, they're not.
Yeah.
They have all these weapons. They have all this firepower, the Matthews, the Marners, the McKinnons, and the Landeskog's and whatnot. But for whatever reason, for teams like them, it doesn't translate the way it needs to in the playoffs. Now, Tampa found that right mix where they had that line, which they lost this past summer because they had all those guns, but then they also had the guys like Gaudreau and all those other guys.
A mix of guys that can do both the necessary aspects in the playoffs, can still hold it down during the regular season, and then they had the talent, the offensive weaponry, the Steven Stamkoses and all those guys to go out there and battle out through an 82-game season.
The Isles are lacking the skill guys. That's the problem. They have the guys who can grind out of playoffs, but when you're relying on those same guys to also be your goal scorers for 82 games, that's where it becomes a problem. That's where you start looking at guys like Kyle Palmieri, who can't hit the broadside of a barn for the first half of a season, one goal. Right? I mean, you need guys with a higher skill level that you can count on to rip a shot and hit the top right corner. And, Oliver Wahlstrom banking, he had a great goal from the goal line. Was it yesterday against the Blues where he just banked it in off of Bennington? He had a little hole to work with for the net. He put it through, and then they need more of that. They need guys like him that can snipe. Brock can do it every now and then, but they just need more skill overall. So we'll see. I think this is going to be a very, the deadline may be a precursor to what Lou sets up for himself. And then this summer, I think, is going to be extremely interesting to see how he decides to kind of pad this roster. And I had noted on Twitter, I think it was Andy Graziano had posted a list of UFA players coming up this summer. And a lot of them were forwards and wingers. And quite a few of them, if they make it that far, I was like, wouldn't mind him.
Right.
Wouldn't mind him.
Right.
He could help. Right. He could help. And that list, probably starts with Philip Forsberg if he still ends up being available at that time. But I think that bodes well for the Isles, that even if you don't get the first or second guy at the top of your list, like we like to say, I think there's enough guys that could be available where you're like, this guy can help this team. He can be a top six forward that can put some goals in and maybe, relieve that stress of trying to win every game 2-1 and 3-2.
Top of the list.
Top of the list, Matty boy. All right, so let's get to Questions Brewing.
It's time for Questions Brewing, brought to you by Oyster Bay Brewing Company, Long Island's Gold Coast Brewery.
That's right, folks. It's time for Questions Brewing, brought to you by Oyster Bay Brewing Company and their fantastic American lager. Stop into the brewery, pick some up there, go to your local beverage center, get some there. Fantastic stuff. And, of course, the Barn Rocker as well. Great stuff going on at Oyster Bay Brewing Company. Christian, what do you got?
Oh, our first question brewing coming from MJ Beckman. Question brewing. Chara gets honored after going on IR. Does he dress again this year, or does he get the Boychuk treatment?
Why don't you go for that one?
I think he's going to end up dressing again this year at some point. I don't know if he's going to get the Boychuk treatment because I think it was two different scenarios.
Agreed.
And I think the Islanders were kind of in two different spots when it came to those particular players. And so I don't know. I don't think that's the course that's going to kind of play out here with Chara. I think the Islanders kind of still see some value in playing him when they can, and they're going to want to get him back on the ice. And obviously, knowing this team,
they played him every game.
Yeah, I mean knowing this team too, and they value their veterans, right? They're going to want to get him back out there. They're going to want to give him some minutes, and they're going to want to. They're going to want him around guys in more than just kind of that coaching mentor capacity. In the sense that, remember at that point, Johnny Boychuk was around the organization. He was on the ice at practices, kind of working as basically another coach. And I think the Islanders still see that. They don't see Chara in that aspect yet, as far as where his career is. And I think that was more to Johnny Boychuk kind of understanding where things were for him anyway, because everyone kind of looked at that announcement about the eye injury and this and that and went, they kind of questioned it, but I think that was a very serious injury that he went through, considering some of the trauma that he had gone through with some of that. So I think there are two different stages when it comes to their health and their recovery ability.
Right on. No, Christian, I think you hit it on the head. I don't think I need to add more. Yeah, for once.
Wow. Couldn't just say something nice, huh? CGS878 questions brewing. Does Chara play another game before the trade deadline? Does he play another game before the trade deadline?
I mean, that's 3 weeks away. No, 2 weeks away. Sorry, math off. 2 weeks away. Yes, I think he gets in. I think he gets in another one before we hit the trade deadline. So, yes, I don't know what that matters at this point, because the other teams
we're playing.
Teams know what he's bringing to the table these days. Nobody's going to trade for him if they read Islander Twitter. That's for sure. But yeah, I think he does get back in. I genuinely think that the coaching staff wants him in as soon as he's ready, because again, even though people like ourselves here and even you guys in the chat or anybody listening might say why, it seems like they do. Whatever we're not seeing, it seems like they want him in there. And until they finally say, okay, we're definitely not trying to make the playoffs anymore.
Right.
That's when he probably wears the suit a little more often. And, Barry and Lou say, okay, let's finally give Aho a shot at some games here to see if we actually want to keep him around long term. And I think we're at the point where it's time to do that. Let's see what he can do. And look, and there's also the whole the thing about Chara's a veteran, you got to respect him. He didn't sign to be up in the press box, so they're probably, I don't know how much they have to appease him. I don't know, but
I've never gotten that sense that they have to appease.
You never know what goes into any of that stuff, but yeah, I think he gets in before the trade deadline. But I also think that he might sit himself a few more games than he had been, just because they want to see what they got in some of these other guys.
Mike 4652 question brewing. Once Barzal is back, who is sitting?
Yes. The age-old question. Who takes the pine when Barzal comes back? Whoever's in Barry's doghouse at the time. So it's going to be Wahlstrom or Bellows, right? I don't know. I mean, look, Palmieri's not sitting anymore. Is Josh Bailey going to take a seat again if he's healthy? Probably not. I don't know. But then again, we're in this part of the season now where they can give a guy a rest and say, look, we're out of it. Let's give Kiefer and Oliver more of a shot here. Let's give them a consistent amount of games here, some consistent ice time. And maybe Bailey and Palmieri are like, yeah, fine. I'll take a seat, no problem. But who specifically right now? I mean, I don't know if there's anybody in the current lineup that I hate that's in there right now. I mean, maybe you sit Matt Martin again and you just bump somebody else down to the fourth line. Barry seems to be a little more comfortable doing that more recently. But, is there anybody in the top 9 that really deserves to come out? I don't necessarily think so. I want to see Bellows in there still. I want to see Wahlstrom in there still. So I guess if I had to choose, I'd say let Matt Martin sit again and bump somebody else down to the fourth line.
Get out, Matt Martin.
That's probably not what's going to happen. And I love Matt Martin, but I want to see the kids play.
Not with that kind of attitude, you don't.
Okay, well, what do you think?
I think it's interesting because the Islanders, what?
Well, MJ Beckman mentions Otto Koivula. I don't think there's any chance that he's going to be in the lineup if the rest of the guys are healthy. I think he's just kind of getting in there.
Well, Koivu is in
now.
Koivu is in there because there's injuries to multiple players.
Right.
There's not multiple injuries to one player.
Right.
But I think if it's, and you kind of said it before, it depends on who's healthy and who's back in. Like if Josh Bailey is still out and Koivu is an option, Koivu is the first one coming out.
Yeah.
And then it becomes who's sitting for Josh Bailey, and then you hit the question that we kind of have now. But I think right now, depending on the severity of the injury to Josh Bailey, I think Koivula is the first guy that sits.
And Anders Lee was out for personal reasons.
Right. Oh, I forgot about that too. That's right. Yeah, and that's
thank you, Mel.
That obviously adds another element to it. It's interesting. It really is.
Look, I mean, the truth of the matter is...
Because I think you're right. I think you look at the lineup, it'd be Wahlstrom or Bellows, and it'd probably be Bellows.
It depends. We'll see. But, again, I mean, it's just a matter of who they want to see out in the ice now under these circumstances. And, when the New York Islanders decide internally when they're done chasing the playoffs. Because, obviously, Lou Lamoriello still believes in this team. Barry Trotz still believes in this team. We all do. But they're not getting in. So it's just a matter of when I'm curious to see if and when they pivot to kind of giving these guys more ice time because they know they're out of it.
And Jeremy 13 questions brewing. Does Varlamov or Bailey get moved by the deadline?
Varlamov or Bailey?
Yeah.
I think Varlamov is going. I think he's going. I'd be surprised if he didn't because you got to figure you get more for him at the deadline than you do over the summer. And if you're confident enough in Sorokin and the goaltending coaching magic that this team is able to weave, then you kind of go in with confidence that whoever they bring in to back up Sorokin is going to at least do a decent job. I mean, again, the Isles have been pretty spoiled ever since they came in between Greiss, Varlamov, Leonard. They've all performed very well under this coaching staff, so you'd like to think that the next guy that comes in to back up will do the same with Piero Greco and company. So I think Varlamov goes. I think you get the most that you can for him now. There's going to be a team, as Scott Burnside mentioned, like Minnesota that could look for some goaltending. I think Colorado could be a candidate there too. Well, he probably can't go back. He's probably not going back there. But a team like that,
hey, you never know,
that could use a goaltender. I think Varlamov is going. Josh Bailey, I'm really on the fence about that one. Because I think Lou is cold-hearted enough to trade him in the sense that if you consider that cold-hearted, right? A lifetime Islander.
I don't think it's a cold-hearted thing. But I also think that the trade would be something that they'd be in conversation with Bailey about. You know what I mean? Like if a trade with Josh Bailey does come to light, I think that there's going to be some professional courtesy. Because if you think back to when Lou Lamoriello ran the Toronto Maple Leafs, right? And everyone ran that story that, Matt Martin basically kind of had his, not pick of the litter, but, he kind of had a say in where he ended up when they were going to move him, right? And he wanted to go back to Long Island, so Lou made that trade work. I think that if that was the case, Josh Bailey would kind of be given the same professional courtesy that knowing that he's been such a cornerstone. He's been such a cornerstone. I know that's a very controversial thing to say, but he's been such a cornerstone with this organization. He'd be given that kind of respect if that was to come to light, and I think that's how that would play out. But I do agree with Sean. I think ultimately Semyon Varlamov has the most. He's going to draw the most interest from a lot of different teams.
Yeah, and as far as Bailey goes, I mean, again, love him or hate him, he's
still number one.
That's another potential spot that you might have to fill. And it comes down to whether or not Lou and Barry think that are going to put their stock into Wahlstrom and Bellows where they can deal a guy like Bailey and feel comfortable that they can go to battle next year without him and have one of those guys in their place. And maybe that sounds great to some of you out there. It could. I mean, ideally that would be great if they could get some assets for Bailey and have a guy like Wahlstrom or Bellows step in full-time in that role and take over, and you don't bat an eye or you don't miss Josh Bailey. That's nothing personal against Bailey. That's just the nature of the team, right? Like, you eventually have to move on from the older guys and fill them in with younger guys. That's just how it goes. Is it time to do that yet now? I don't know yet.
Listen, I just hope Josh Bailey brings the cup back when he wins it to whatever location he does end up getting traded to and wins a cup there and leads this team to a Stanley Cup title. Because that'd be pretty cool.
I don't know if he's going to get dealt, but I will say this.
I think there's more of a likelihood with Varlamov. I think there are.
Absolutely.
We've talked about it. There are teams that could use a guy like Josh Bailey for a ton of different reasons. But Varlamov right now, while I don't think that what you're going to get back is as high as what everyone thinks it's going to be, he's the one that holds the most potential to bring you a good return.
Agreed. And here's my qualifiers for trading Josh Bailey.
You hate him, obviously.
End of show. No. If Barry and Lou think that are going to bet on Wahlstrom and Bellows to unseat him, so to speak, next year, if they feel like they're going to be ready to do that, I think that makes it more possible. And then B, if the return that Lou can get for Bailey is something he thinks is worth it, then he'll do it. I don't think it's going to be much more complicated than that. I think it comes down to those facts. Or if Lou can bring somebody else in from outside the team, but you're obviously playing with a little more fire there because you don't know if you're going to get to make that trade. You don't know if you're going to be able to sign that free agent. So I think they have to feel a little more comfortable about what's happening within to be willing to deal a guy like Bailey when you still have him at least for next year.
Yeah.
Right? He's not a pending UFA. So, I think it's less likely, but it could happen. Big non-answer there.
Yeah, right. I was thinking back to, I was like, you really pulled the Lou Lamoriello there. You just talked and
I learned
talked
from the
and
best.
talked. And
I learned from the best.
I didn't learn a gosh darn thing. T-Boyle 13, question Bruin. When is the NHL... Wait, let me say this angry because I feel like that's the way T-Boyle wrote this. So hold on. When is the NHL going to hold these referees, NHL player safety, and the War Room accountable for these mind-blowing decisions? The non-call was definitely in against Colorado. The refs let the game get out of hand yesterday. Those bastards. The last part is me editorializing.
Tom, the problem is that they don't necessarily think that they need to be held accountable. They think that they're doing as good a job as they can. Does that mean they're not, keeping tabs on things? Of course they are. But I don't think that the NHL thinks they're doing as bad a job as everybody else thinks they are.
Yeah, I mean,
how much they're going to hold themselves accountable for it, I don't know. I think we've already kind of seen the answer to that question because it's been a lot of years now where a lot of these calls continue to be inconsistent. I do genuinely think they're trying to get the calls right. I don't think there's any conspiracies. I don't think that they're trying to favor one team over another, one result over another. I mean, you could dedicate a whole podcast to that, I suppose, but at the end of the day, I think they're trying to make the right call. They certainly don't every time. There's no doubt about it. There's been plenty that I disagree with. I don't think much is going to change. I think this is just the world we live in with the NHL where sometimes they're going to get it right, sometimes they're not, sometimes you're going to love it, sometimes you're going to hate it.
I think that, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, and that was the fact that if you look at the lack of transparency with so many other aspects of this particular sport with the NHL, it's consistent with that. Mm-hmm. Because there's no transparency when it comes to injuries. Like you can look at any other sport and basically they're going to tell you down to the specific vertebrae or not vertebrae, but rib, right. It'll be like the M3 rib cage that's broken on the left side of his patella. You know what I mean? Like they're very specific. There's none of that in the National Hockey League. And for better or for worse, that hasn't changed. Now where I think maybe there might be some change or accountability or anything of that is perhaps as betting becomes more prevalent in the sport as more, because I think that's sort of why a lot of these leagues have sort of changed their stance with some of the transparency that's gone on. Now, does that necessarily apply to the officials? Not totally, but I think that the changing mindset can only help get to that point because I agree. The fact that you cannot really make a request for an official to answer for what the reasoning was, I think is asinine. The fact that you can't, the NHL does put out those player, Department of Player Safety videos and the kind of the explanations.
They have made improvements in that way. Like when they moved on from Colin Campbell and they brought in Brendan Shanahan and now
Chris King
and
who runs the War Room.
Well, David, right. And then you have David Perros, right? He's running player safety now. Not sure.
But it's not as though you can really be like, all right, this is what you're telling me, but like, why? Like, well, you know what I mean? Yeah. So like, there's still the lack of transparency, and that's the biggest confusion for anything. And that's the issue.
And the truth is, man, there's so much gray area to a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
It's not always cut and dry. It's not always black and white. And unfortunately, the only choice we have is to put faith in the fact that they're trying their best to interpret that gray area to the right answer. I mean, again, you can be cynical and say no. They kind of bend it to their will when they want, and maybe they do. And it's, you bring up the gambling thing, and it's so funny how not too long ago gambling was the devil to the NHL, and now they're right in bed with them now. And it is kind of, I don't know if scary is the right word, but you wonder if that could potentially taint the game down the road when the gambling comes into it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
I think you could. I don't necessarily know if I agree with that because I think
it's
you
just
could
a question.
Say
I'm not saying no. Happen,
I know, but I'm saying, but you pose the question. Yeah. I just don't. It's an interesting changing in mindset because I think the NHL, like everyone else, saw the money that came along with it.
Yeah.
And they
let's get a cut.
Like a cartoon, like a Disney cartoon or whatever, they just saw, dollar signs in their eyes and the stance changed all of a sudden. And listen, like the league needs the money, especially after everything that's been through with the COVID pandemic and, all the revenue lost from the league standpoint, from a team standpoint. And so they want every ounce, every single dollar that they can get their hands on.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what sort of changes come from that as far as transparency, because it's tough to say to a bettor, oh, you should pick the Islanders. You should have the Islanders at -15, or I don't know betting that well, so whatever.
right.
But you don't know if their best player may or may not be playing tonight because he's day to day with a upper body injury.
Right.
So I'm curious to see how that changes. Question brewing from Andremi 13: Is Matt Martin on this team next year? He looks done. Retire. Bought out? ?
I think he's back. Whether he gets into 82 games or not, I think he's back.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think he's back. Look, he's got a couple more years on that contract he just signed. Yeah. I think Matt Martin's back. Zizekas is back, and I think the best fourth line in hockey casualty is going to be Cal Clutterbuck, and it may come on March 21st.
Interesting. I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't know if he's going to retire, but I think it'll be the same kind of. But like at a certain point, you got to move on.
Look. I mean. Maybe in a sense, him and Ross Johnston kind of trade places where Matt Martin's the guy you're paying $1 million a year to never play, but be in the locker room and go in there when it's time to throw him in there every now and then. But yeah, I think he's back. Again, he may not play 41 games next year. I don't know, but I think he's back, whether he's a big part of the team or not. On the ice.
Question brewing.
Yeah.
Mel Armenia 22. Bold prediction, who do you think will win the cup this year? I feel like this is a dangerous question for me.
Well, you're either right or wrong.
Well, no, the urge to just pick one specific team.
Oh, yeah. Well, good luck with that.
For a reaction is strong.
One thing I love is that I don't think there's any clear favorite. I think that there's a lot of teams that can win. It's not like it's definitely these guys or definitely those guys. I know a lot of people are very high on Colorado.
Mm-hmm. Every year, the last couple of years, they've always been a cup favorite or a cup contender.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go with the Florida Panthers.
That's a bold prediction.
Florida Panthers are gonna win the cup this year.
You know who I kind of want to take, because I think it is a bold prediction. Calgary
I like
Flames.
It. But this is Calgary, Minnesota. Yeah. I think these are all teams that can win.
Notice they're mostly West Coast teams. I think Florida's really good. I don't know if they have enough to get over the hump. Tampa Bay, I don't know if they have the same juice as they have the last couple of years. They're not winning
the cup again. And that's not Islander bias. They're just not winning the cup
And
this
then
year.
You look at the East, Pittsburgh, I think, is kind of the same thing. Like, do they have the juice to really keep doing this? Carolina, I don't know. They're always on the cusp of being this really fun, great team, but are they perpetually just a team that...
I think Carolina comes out of the Metro.
Right.
I don't think that they win the cup.
Is Carolina that team now that's perpetually in the playoff? But is Carolina the bridesmaid now, but never the bride?
Right.
Listen, my urge to pick the New York Rangers just to screw with people is very high.
It's not their time.
But I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think it's their time right now. And then, Toronto's not doing it. Like, let's be real. Again,
Toronto's not coming out of that division.
My urge to
they're
screw
going
with
to get
people,
eaten alive by the state of Florida, whether it's Tampa or Florida. They're not coming out of that division.
So I think it's a West Coast team, Western Conference team, West Conference team. I think Calgary would be a fun team to see make a run. Of all the teams also that are tolerable to see win a cup from the north of the border, Calgary probably fits the bill.
Okay.
And maybe Winnipeg would fit the bill.
Well, they're not winning the cup this year.
But those are the two cities where I'd be like, all right, I'm happy for them. Toronto, screw off. Montreal, I hate them. Vancouver is whatever. If they made it to the cup final, they'd riot and burn their own city down like the idiots that they were last time. And I think I cover them. I mean, Edmonton is Edmonton. It's hard to root for Edmonton with some of their personnel that they have on their roster.
They're not
Leave
going
it at that.
They're not doing anything.
But that too.
They're not doing anything. No way.
But and two, just looking, I don't know if Los Angeles can kind of sustain the success they've had into the playoffs.
Los Angeles isn't going to the cup.
And then Vegas is kind of a wild card, no pun intended.
Look, Vegas is a team that can still win it. As long as Robin Leonard's healthy. And look, they got Eichel now. Pacioretty's been in and out of the lineup all season.
How good does that trade? How good does that trade look now for the Vegas Golden Knights? Like,
I mean, it basically became a deadline acquisition, right? You had to wait to get him, but I mean, who? There's no better player to get.
But basically, every team was like, he's not going to play till next year. He's not going to play. No one expected him to play. I mean, I think it was always kind of out there that maybe it could happen. But Jack Eichel, like walking out like some sort of WWE badass right there, all of a sudden out of nowhere. So I think that's kind of cool, and I think that made that trade much more valuable to them now, especially than it did even at the time.
And he's got enough time to get used to Vegas before they hit the playoffs. So like Vegas getting into the playoffs with Eichel, I think they're going to be really tough.
He perfected his blackjack game.
Well, that's good to know. But yeah, I like Vegas a lot with Eichel. I mean, that's tough. I mean, again, Leonard's got to stay healthy. He's been in and out of the lineup a little bit.
That'd also be a great story too, to see Robin Leonard win a cup.
And they have so many good players. You know, you got Stone over there. He's had injury troubles and stuff like that too. Riley Smith is great. They just have a lot of good players in that team. They have good D. I mean, I could see Vegas. I think I like Vegas more than Colorado. Again, when healthy, I think I like Vegas more than Colorado.
But yeah, that's always the caveat to anything.
And but I like your Calgary pick.
Yeah.
I think they're a wild card out there in the West for sure. So there you go. I guess you got Calgary from Christian. You got Florida from me.
Yeah.
And we got plenty of time between now and then to change our minds.
and burn this tape so no one ever hears that we said these.
Exactly. Do we have anything else?
We do. We have one more question.
One more. Okay. Then we're out of here.
MJ Beckman, question number one. Why can't Sorokin cover his posts this year? Seems to give up a goal from bad angles every game.
Wouldn't say every game, but MJ Beckman, I think you are onto something. I was just commenting on that actually with my buddy yesterday. That, yeah, he has given up more goals than you would like coming from, like, the goal line.
Right.
Or even behind it.
Weird angles.
Weird angles where he's just kind of keeping a gap open.
Yeah.
And, these players have been lucky enough or maybe skillful enough to sneak the puck through that area. But you know what you can say about that? That's correctable. That's him spending time on his game, spending time with the goalie coaches and making sure he's protecting his post a little better than he is. So if that's the one glaring flaw to his game, it's something you can correct. Maybe he's just cheating a little bit too much towards, anticipating a puck ending up on the other side of the net or whatever the case may be. But you're right. It's noticeable. It has happened, but I think it's something that he can minimize going forward.
You also have to remember this is his first full NHL season, and there are going to be issues and things, especially kind of going through the grind that maybe you're not used to. I think the interesting thing here as well, and I don't know why I keep using the word interesting. I got to find a different word. I got to leave like a not a syllabus,
thought-provoking,
a thesaurus open in one of these things. And be all right, I'm going to use interesting.
Sure, why not?
Change it up. But one aspect that is of note.
That piques your interest, yeah.
That piques my interest.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is you always talk about how players playing their first 82-game season, they're impacted this way, they're impacted that way. You never necessarily hear about specific impacts from the goaltending perspective, right? Like, I'd be curious to know how playing an 82-game season, or, I mean, obviously they don't play all 82 games, but for a goaltender, what that first full NHL season is like compared to maybe what Sorokin's been through now, which is very, very different. He played 20-something games last year total,
something like
between
that,
the playoffs and the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's also playing a part of it,
Coming
too.
from a bigger ice surface.
Yeah. So I think, as Sean
Christian
said...
Arnold, Ilya Sorokin apologist.
Yeah. That's it. That's fair. But no, right before you insulted me, I was going to say Sean makes a good point that those are correctable mistakes.
Right.
So,
right.
But I won't say Sean made a good point. I will
It's
say
too late.
I
made
a great
It's on the
point
record.
that they're correctable
It's on the
mistakes.
record.
Yeah.
That's going to be the quote of the week, actually.
No,
you
not.
complimenting my comment. No. Is that it?
That is it.
Are you certain?
I'm just making sure.
There might have been some late additions there. Let's see.
I mean, it's 10 o'clock.
I know.
Well,
you know what it was, Christian? We missed you so much that we had to do a marathon show with you. Just to get nothing else.
I didn't say anything.
All right, folks. Well, especially those of you live, want to thank you all so much for hanging out with us.
Thank you.
This late into the night, going past 2 hours. But yes, thank you all for tuning in at twitch.tv/HockeyNightNY and your favorite podcast providers. Huge thanks to Scott Burnside of Daily Faceoff for giving us plenty of time. Great stuff from him. And, of course, a huge thanks to RJ Daniels, American Bar and Grill, located at 2798 Sunrise Highway in Rockville Center. The best place to catch the Isles when you can't make it to the game. Don't just go for the Isles. They have live music, comedy night, trivia, a late-night bar scene. They have it all. Big thanks to Blue Line Deli and Bagels, located at 719 West Jericho Turnpike in Huntington, an official partner of the New York Islanders and the greatest deli around. Check out the menu at BlueLineDeli.com for all their great selections and hockey-themed heroes. A huge thanks to Ty Technology, a voice-over IP company providing phone services for businesses across the country. Check them out at TyTechnology.com for all your telecom needs, or give them a call at 516-856-7800 and get 3 free months of service. And another big thanks to Oyster Bay Brewing Company, located at 36 Audrey Avenue in Oyster Bay. You can order their great beers and merchandise at oysterbaybrewing.com for curbside pickup, local delivery, or shipping anywhere in New York, and get 15% off with coupon code HNINY. Christian.
Hey, it's me.
C_Arnold01 on Twitter.
That's also me.
That's where you can find him. Follow me at Shawnee Hockey. Follow the show at Hockey Night NY on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And remember, if you don't have any St. Patty's Day plans, or if you do, make new ones. St. Patrick's Day at the Marriott next to the Coliseum. We're going to do a live viewing party there, pre-game show. We gave you all the details before. It's going to be a lot of fun. Come down, Isles Rangers, St. Patrick's Day. And if you have a really fun, good time at the Marriott, you can just stay there. Get a room. It'll be great.
A really great fun time.
Come on down, folks. Either way, we'll see you next episode, next weekend. You guys have been great. Thanks for all the questions. We'll see you next week.
Peace out. But also bye.
Also bye. For Christian Arnold, I'm Sean Cuthbert. We've been Hockey Night New York. Peace out. Yo.